student. Sorry for the delay start. Would like to request CMA Prashant sir to start our today's session. Over to you, Prashant sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Good morning, friends, and yes, extremely sorry for the delay. And we are straight away starting with our examination topic, right? As we are going to have 3 day session, wherein we are going to study different topics. So today we are essentially starting with portfolio management because that is one of the heavy-weighted topic, as we know. Tomorrow we shall be focusing mostly on the chapters like mutual fund, derivatives, and other things. And the last day we shall be having clear focus on international finance. So that is how we are going to talk about all these topics. Straight on to the topic. So because we're already delayed, we are starting with the topic straight away. We are initially starting with the concept of risk and return. So let us try to understand the concept, how a layman would define risk. Right, so quickly we would be getting on to the topic. Now, a layman would always talk about a risk in this way that first, he would think about risk is the chance of losing money. Another thing which comes to his mind is any instrument which is unfamiliar to them. So probably they don't know the instrument. So that also becomes riskier for them. That is how they understand the risk. And one more thing, now let it be one of the best companies. Say, for example, somebody invested in shares of Infosys, TCS, Wipro, such kind of good quality shares. And if they have incurred a loss in these shares in past, they would understand this investment to be risky. That means they will never repeat their investments. That is how we understand the definition of risk from whose point of view? Layman. We are not laymen. So how we would understand risk precisely? Risk means instability of returns. First of all, risk means instability of returns. So when I'm talking about risk, let us try to identify some of the instruments which are having variable return as well as some of the instruments which are having fixed returns. So talking about equity, real estate, or say gold, right? These are the common investments. These are the instruments which are having variable returns. Where in other side, I can talk about bank FDs, right? These are having a short return. So say, for example, I make an FD at 5% right now for a year, then I'm going to get 5%. So that is how I can differentiate two types of products. There is a long list, but just to make you understand, just to guide you, the variable return instruments are risky. So risk means instability of returns. So the products of which return is not stable, they are risky. It defines ups and downs in the market returns. We know market keeps on changing. That also leads to risk. Another thing, actual return being different than expected. So once again, understand it. I made investment in mutual funds or equity shares expecting a return of say 8%. However, at the end of year, I could realize that I've ended with just 6% return. So my actual return being different than what was expected, this also leads to risk. Risk can be measured through a measure called standard deviation that is much more known to us. Like बहुत सालों से हम standard deviation सीखते ही जा रहे हैं. So there is nothing new. Neelu, probably I'm using MacBook, so that has been the reason. There is some what you can say permission related issues, so that has been the reason webcam is not getting on. However, I'll try it after some time if it opens once again. Okay, there is one more point which has been mentioned in our book. Okay, so getting back to the previous one. So what we got from this, first, risk means instability of returns. So the instruments which are offering you a short return do not lead to any risk. Actual return being different than what was expected, that is also an incidence of risk. and risk can be measured through standard deviation, right? So these are some of the definitions which we understand. We will get into the concept of standard deviation in much more better and precise manner. Okay, let us quickly understand the difference between investment and speculation. When we talk about investments, the risk taken is rewarded. So we call it trade-off. So if I'm investing quality stocks or at quality places, I take a risk, but over a longer period of time, I would be getting a compensatory return. Wherein speculation talks about it's a high risk, high return gain. How it is different? So there are some more characteristics we understand. Investment has no leverage. So say for example, you have to say buy shares of Infosys today, and your investment horizon, say for example, happens to be of 10-20 years. Would you be borrowing money for the purpose of making investments? Answer is simply no. ऐसा कभी नहीं होता है. So investment usually happen with your own money. So when it comes to speculation, like many of you must be buying equity shares and all, so you must be aware about the fact that if I want to get into intraday activities, then probably I would be having 1 lakh rupee, then balance trading capacity is given by the broker. So he would be saying that if I deposit 1 lakh rupee, he would allow me to trade up to 2 lakh rupee. So that additional 1 lakh is indicating a leverage. So when it comes to speculation, there is a leverage involved, and that is usually provided by the market participant, that broker, we can say. So investment has longer horizon, right? And speculation is quickly. So anything wherein you are investing money कि जैसे price बढ़ जाएगी, हम बेच के free हो जाएंगे, will make money. So they all get into the activity of speculation. Like investment क्या बता रहा है कि I'm investing right now. I like to grow with the growth of the company. I'll ensure that I remain invested for 10, 15, 20 years and I'll grow rich over a period of time. So that is the characteristic of investment. So आप में से जो भी लोग probably shares buy करते भाव जैसे बढ़ा और बेच दिए, you all are speculators, not investors. Now, when I make investments, I'm talking about mostly the fundamental analysis. I talk about who are the promoters of the company, that I find out first. Then I talk about products of the company, sustainability of the company. So I'll try to check almost everything which has an impact on the company. That is known as fundamental analysis, wherein speculators rely on rumors. hunches means वो अंदर से feeling आती है ना कि like मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है that this stock is going to go, this investment is going to do wonderful. So hunch बताते हैं, like some of the inside jokes and hot tips which are circulated in the market, right? So basis investment का काफी clear है that it is fundamental. Speculation can be anything. Time horizon, as I said, is long term, and speculation is short term. Right, so this is how we can understand investment and speculation. Yes, that's a good question. Speculation includes technical analysis, of course, because technical analysis talks about analyzing the price patterns, and those price patterns give you opportunity to enter into, and definitely once that pattern is over, it simply says you have to move out. So technical analysis is not the investment category, it's the speculation category. That's perfect. Okay, moving further, how investment is different from gambling. So we simply understand कि investment तो पता है. Talk about gambling. Gambling is exponential risk. When it comes to investment, you can lose whatever you invested. So like I invested 10 lakh rupees, I lose 10 lakh. That's the maximum risk I do have. But when it comes to gambling, right, if I've come with 10 lakh rupees, there is a great scope that I lose more than that. Level of uncertainty, it's not measurable and not predictable when it comes to gambling. Like some of the examples if I have to give, so horse race, lotteries, card games, like वो सब gambling में आता है. Basis of decision. So when, say for example, आपको simply ऐसा मैं दूँ, like you want to buy lottery ticket. So अब क्या basis पे selection करोगे? Could be based on color, could be based on a picture, could be based on the number. But there are many more unscientific subjective ideas for gambling. So that is how decisions have been made. जबकि investment की बात करें तो much more things are known to us now. They are shares, bonds and other financial products like you can get into venture capital, private equity. ये सब चीजें आपके investments में आती है. Okay. We are starting with now the proper chapter and we are calculating the returns. We have two types of returns. One is holding period return, another is per annum return. We would also be talking about time weighted rate of return, money weighted rate of return. ये सब हमें सीखना है. It is there in our book. Okay, so when I talk about holding period return, simply say I invested 100 today, which happens to be 110 after a year, then I would say I've earned 10% return. My return is 10%. Fine. So what are the components here? So मैंने तो एक ही component लिया, that is only the price. But other than that, say for example, I'm investing in bonds, I'm investing in equity shares, तो उसमें से भी तो cash flow generate होता है ना? So bonds have a tendency to pay interest, that is better known as coupon. If I am reinvesting that interest, I would be getting interest on interest. So मेरे पास एक coupon income है, interest on interest है, and finally if I'm selling it, I would be having capital gain or capital loss. So these are the components of returns, and I would be finding out holding period return. Right, so we would be finding out holding period return. And for equity shares, definitely the same methodology as we know. Like I am getting dividend, I can reinvest my dividend. So once again, that reinvestment is the part of return. And then capital gain and capital losses if it goes. So holding period return talks about the different components of return. First is the cash flow, reinvestment activity of that cash flow, and finally the capital gain or capital loss. Right? These are the things which are essentially considered in holding period return. But yes, one thing to be understood is in investment world we understand per annum returns or say annualized returns, wherein holding period return is not annualized. So let us get on to some of the basic computations. Holding period return can be for two types of data. First is ex post, that is the past data, and it can be based on expectations. We call it ex ante returns or ex ante data. That's the future data. Okay, now ex post is historical. So whatever has happened, उससे मैं returns ढूंढ रहा हूँ अलग अलग periods की, so that is ex post. Good to understand because past में क्या हुआ वो जानने में हमें इंटरेस्ट तो होता ही है, because many a times we understand that past returns reflect the future performance. However, future is uncertain. That has been the reason we have to assign something like probability. So we know the different range of outcomes, but what is going to happen, that is not known. That's been the reason we are assigning probability. And then this return happens to be important for all the investment analysts. Reason behind what is going to happen is more important than what has happened. So investment world rely more on expected return, that is the future returns. So let's do some mathematical work. Now the equation which I have narrated here, वैसे बहुत आसान है. I'm not a big fan of equations, so we'll try to remember very less number of equations first of all. So I said if you invest 100 and you get 110, so your rate of return is equal to 10%. So that means you are very well aware about this particular equation. Different components, say P1 is the current market value or current market price, P0 is your start value or the value at which you purchased it, D1 indicates the distributions which you have received, and P0 is once again your initial investment value or simply the purchase price. ठीक है, चलो, so let's take this example. If I am buying share, see 2006 की प्राइस है, 2007 की प्राइस है, if I am buying share at 30 rupees and of which current market price is 45 and it has paid me a dividend of 2, it has paid me dividend of 2, then how much is my rate of return? Easy to find out, चलो गिन लेते हैं. So 45 minus 30 plus 2, ठीक है, whole divided by 30 into 100, just try to find out कितना परसेंटेज रिटर्न आता है. Are you getting this? Yes, 56.67. Yes, Archana has got the answer. That's great. Fine. So ये हो गया. Similarly, हम फटाफट दूसरा रिटर्न भी ढूंढ सकते हैं. So that is 50 is the current price, 30 has been the purchase price, 5 has been the dividends which I've got in between or in the interim, and this is my finally rate of return. Okay, so I can rewrite the equation once again for you. That is 50 minus 30 plus 5 whole divided by 30 into 100, and you will surely get 83.33. Moving further, last one is interesting. Last one is interesting. It is having negative return. So is the reason. So 25 minus 40 plus 0.5 and divided by 40. It's not 25, right? So because ये मेरी purchase price थी, 40 has been my purchase price and into 100. So just try to get the answer. I can read all your answers. Fine. So it is minus 36.25. Great. So you got the answer. Moving further, so this ex post return, what it does not consider is time value of money principle. Because see, यहाँ पर तो हमने, like we have taken only 1 year. So if my holding period is up to a year, then this goes well. इसको हम रियल लाइफ में यूज कर सकते हैं. इफ माई होल्डिंग पीरियड इज फॉर अ मंथ और अ क्वार्टर और 6 months और सो, तो इसको मैं यूज कर सकता हूँ, और फॉर अ ईयर एज वेल आई कैन यूज. बट इफ माई होल्डिंग पीरियड is more than a year, if my holding period is say 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, then this methodology doesn't work. This doesn't work. Reason behind कि time value का यूज मुझे वहां पर करना पड़ेगा. So move further. So that has been the reason. If I want to find out कि 5 साल से इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रहा हूँ, I want my rate of return, per annum rate of return. So how do I get onto that? So that is the first one, arithmetic mean. Arithmetic mean has got two types. First is simple average, another is weighted average. We have got two types of means, simple average and another is weighted average. We are going to talk about both. Simple average talks about कि चलो मैं 3 साल का इन्वेस्टमेंट होराइजन लेता हूं. सो ईयर 1, ईयर 2 एंड ईयर 3, आई एम गेटिंग in the first year return of 10%, second year return has been 12%, and third year my return has been 14%. This is important input for this particular thing. I've been investing from last 3 years. and I've got returns of all the 3 years. चलो टोटल करेंगे, so that is 36, ठीक है, and divided by 3, so there is simple average. तो मेरा per annum return approximately 12% हुआ. That's what I can understand. So this is the methodology of simple average. True. So arithmetic mean is useful when I have to find out per annum return. Once again, the problem क्या था holding period return में, that it considers the total period, wherein investment world is much more interested in finding out the per annum return. So that has been the reason we have to arrive at per annum return. So we have done this way. This is one of the methods. So it's arithmetic mean. Understandable? So we are straight moving further. There is one more that is called geometric mean, right? So many of you must have heard about a rate of return that is called CAGR, that is compound annual growth rate, or say simply per annum return. Now, issue is that we are not allowed to use the scientific or financial calculator, so thoda technological problem hai. So that has been the reason we cannot get into long computations, but simply छोटा data लेके हम easily कर सकते हैं. So we can use short data and we can easily find it out. Say for example, my year 1 return is 10 and year 2 return is say 14. So these have been my returns. I want to find out the compound annual growth rate, that is also known as geometric mean. How do I find out? So देखो पहले simple हम ढूंढ लेते हैं. 24 divided by 2, that is equal to 12% is my simple average. That is simple average. However, if I'm willing to find out geometric mean, तो कैसे ढूंढेंगे? So if I go with this equation, simply it says 1 plus 0.10. See this have been in percentage terms. So 1 plus 0.10 into 1 plus 0.14. ठीक है, and raised to 1 by 2, or simply you can do square root and you can arrive at the answer easily. चलो बताओ तो इसका आंसर. सो ये कितना आ रहा है 1 पॉइंट, सो मल्टीप्लाई ऐसे 1.10. चलो सिंप्लीफाई करके देता हूँ 1.14 and say raised to 1 by 2, that is square root. This got an answer, that is 1.11. Don't think so. This is square root करो. Yes, it is 1.1198, correct. So square root करने के बाद it is 1.1198. That's the value. And finally, right, because I've added 1, so minus 1 into 100 मुझे करना पड़ेगा. So that is 11.98%. That is the geometric mean. Since this is having compounding effect, it is definitely better than simple average. So if you were to ask me which one is better or which one is precise, then I must say that geometric mean gives us better estimation of the rate of return. However, we are using the normal calculator, so that has been the reason. This is the concept which has been most of the times muted in our examination, because over a period of my 12 years teaching in CMA, I've never seen any question which has been asked on this particular pattern. However, this is there. सीखना तो है, but they are not testing. Okay, so if I ask you to find out, say, arithmetic mean from this data, how would you find out? Now, Binoy has a question why one has been deducted. See, while we did the return, so I had 10 percentage return and 14 percentage return. So I understand this way that if I'm investing 1 rupee right now, so year one is 10, year two is 14. So if I'm investing 1 rupee right now, so what it would be at the end of the year, so it is going to be 1.10. Then similarly, if I hold it for one more year, it's going to be something bigger. So finally, जो 1 रुपए का principal amount था, that has to be subtracted to arrive at the return component. So that has been the reason I have to subtract. And most of the times, either we take $1 or 1 rupee as a base value to find out all these things mathematically. So it is the same question, similar kind of question, which has been given to you. You have to find out arithmetic mean. कैसे ढूंढेंगे? सी यहाँ पर तो मुझे सीधी प्राइस दी है. So arithmetic mean ढूंढने के लिए we have to first of all find out कि year on year return क्या है. So how much is my year on year return? So first year return, my 100 has become 180 at the end of the year. So my return is 80%. Is it true? Now 180 has become 115.20 in year two. So कैसे करेंगे? So how much is my rate of return? So I'll say 115.20, right? Minus 180 divided by 180 into 100. So how much is it? My second year return has been 180 से 115.20. That is minus 36. Chalo, common answer. That is minus 36. Okay, so I can now easily list down that my year one return is 80%. Year two return has been minus 36. Now see, you will get to know कि why geometric mean is better than arithmetic mean. अगर मैं arithmetic mean ढूंढता हूँ यहाँ पर, so this happens to be 44 and then divide by 2. So this particular methodology says that my annualized return is 22%. But agar, like if you can look at it intuitively, because logic तो सबसे super normal होना चाहिए, mathematics तो है, but logically if I see that I invested 100 today or invest 100 today, after 2 years it is suggesting that it is 115.20 only, then how come my return be 22% per annum? Possible ही नहीं है ना, because 2 साल में I have earned 15.20, then how it can be 22% per annum? So something really wrong with simple average method, right? Now let us also find out geometric mean using the same concept. Okay, so once again वही परसेंट 1 प्लस करके हम करते हैं. So 1.80 into, ये तो सिंपली हो गया, 1 प्लस कर दिया, इसको थोड़ा मेहनत करना पड़ेगा. 1 प्लस minus 0.36, तो मैं सीधा कर देता हूं because it's a negative return. So you can just simply go ahead and find out and find square root of it, then minus 1. And yes, we want the answer to be in percentage terms, multiply with 100. So how much it happens to be? Batao. Yes, Kishan has done it correctly. Now Kishan also share the answer. Okay, wow, so there are so many answers, no? Super fast. It is 7.33%. That is the common answer. Consensus says it is 7.33 and that looks correct also, because मैंने start किया 100 से 2 साल के end पे it is 115.20, then definitely like 7% around return looks correct. So are you getting the problem which is there with the simple average methodology? simple average methodology says that, or it works really well, chalo says that, wo tumko pata hai, but I would highlight why this ruckus has happened actually. Like it is very easy to cheat anybody by showing simple averages in that case. Okay, so the problem arise, reason behind simple average works really well wherein the data points are very close to each other. So say for example मैं year 1 का return 10 लेता हूँ और year 2 का return I take 12 and I find out simple average that is equal to 11 percentage, and I find out geometric average, that is CAGR, that is also going to be 11 percentage, because this is very close to each other. In our case, you could easily identify that first year return had been 80, means year 1 return is 80% and year 2 return is -36. आप देखो तो सही दोनों के बीच का difference, it is 116 percentage का difference है दोनों के बीच में. So that has been the reason जो result आया वो बहुत ही weird आया. Fine, so this is how we can understand the difference between both the types of returns, simple and geometric, both. Move further. Now we are getting on to the concept of standard deviation. Then we have to calculate, quickly get on to coefficient of variation. Then we'll talk about beta, portfolio risk. सब कुछ हमें set कर देना. आज मैं systematic, unsystematic, alpha, and probably if I go up to the pharma selectivity measure, वहां तक अगर हम पहुंच जाए तो मजा आ जाएगा. अच्छा, by the way, I have had one question which came from I just missed the name because I've got so many answers in between. About a brief profile of me. So I'm Prashant Shah. I'm located in Ahmedabad, and I've been associated with chapter office from 2008, and I've been teaching only two subjects there. One is this one, that is strategic finance, and another is business valuation. These are the two subjects that have been taught by me from almost like last 12 years. And by qualification, I am Master of Science in Finance, which leads to CFA. And my other qualifications have been I'm Chartered Wealth Manager, I'm Certified Financial Planner, and I do run my own educational institute related to global courses essentially. And yes, because I like teaching in CMA from last so many years. I've taught in CA also for many years, then I discontinued. But yes, somehow I'm much more connected with this particular program. So I'm still on and would like definitely to go on with this curriculum for many years. Fine. So अब हम आगे बढ़ते हैं and talking about ex ante returns, that is relating to future. And अब यहाँ से हम धीरे धीरे major points पे focus करते जाएंगे. We've got limited number of things to be done, but we have to catch the concepts precisely because अब already थोड़ा तो ये सब topic revise करके बैठे हो, and that has been the reason. Past papers भी आपने देख लिए होंगे, and you know that this is the topic which is going to be tested the most in examination. Okay, so on to future. So future is not okay. You want the PowerPoints? Sure. So I'll try to share all the PPTs with you. Don't worry. So future is unpredictable, or in a way I would say risk and uncertainty का difference यही है that uncertainty is not measurable. So you don't know the range of outcomes there may be, but when I'm talking about risk, so you know what can happen, right? What all things can happen. So you know the range of outcomes, but you don't know what is going to happen exactly. So इसे हम risk बताते हैं. So there is a difference between risk and uncertainty. Uncertainty means it is not measurable. It is not measurable. Wherein risk is measurable. Risk says that you know the different probable outcomes, but which one is going to happen is not known to you. Okay. Now simply understand. यहाँ पर हमने तीन सिनेरियो लिए. This is called probability distribution. This is called probability distribution. Three such scenario. First is recession, another is low growth, and high growth. So if economy gets into any of these three scenario, then I have given different probabilities and then different returns as well. Okay, first, if economy is in recession, there is 25% or 0.25 probability and return would be 15. If probability of say scenario of low growth, I talk about it is 0.45 and return is 20. Economy to be at high growth, probability is 0.3 and return is 25. That's what I can expect. अब मुझे इतना तो clear है, like one thing is very much known to me, understandable also, कि any of this three thing can happen. Like at the end of the year, ये तीन में से कुछ भी हो सकता है. But I don't know exactly which one is going to happen. So that has been the reason. Let me look at a weighted average picture of all the outcomes. So अब हम कौन से concept पे जा रहे हैं? It is weighted average. Last time we had simple average. Now we are getting onto the concept of weighted average. So what do? I use probability as weights. Okay, multiply, 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 weights with returns. So 15 into 0.25, that should be 3.75. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is, Arjun has very interesting question. In practice, how do you find out probabilities? To answer this question, not to stretch this answer, but simply I would say it's subjective, based on my own understanding about the different economic scenario. So आप जो probability बिठाओगे और मैं मेरे calculation के लिए जो probability बिठाऊंगा, they would be different. They are subjective in nature. Then it is 9, and another is, how much does it come? 7.5. And if I make a total of all, right, how much is it? It is 20.25. Correct. So it is 20.25 percentage. We call this particular thing to be, इसको या तो simply हम बताए weighted average return, considering all the different probabilities as weight, or else I can also call this expected return, because now onwards we would be using this term more. It is expected return is the term to be used to indicate this return, because it relates to future period, and future may obviously we can't say anything with certainty. So that has been the reason we assigned different probabilities, and this is the weighted average called expected return. Clear yahan tak? I do have a question on this. I know at the end of the year I can have a return of 15, 20 और 25. ये तीन में से कोई एक रिटर्न मेरा हो सकता है at the end of the year. It will not be 20.25, because 20.25 is a weighted average of all scenario, and definitely that is not going to be my rate of return. Once again, my returns can be either 15 or 20 or 25. Right? तो मैंने 20.25 क्यों ढूंढा? If it is not going to be my rate of return, then why did I calculate it? So anybody would like to share? Rahul has got an answer, so let's read it. Not exactly. So anybody who would like to share something, like why it's 20.25, it's not going to happen. Still, I calculated it. Right. So yeah, we have got so many answers. Wow. So to compare with other opportunities to minimize the risk, which is closer to low growth scenario and minimum return. Right. It's calculating. Wow. So that's super. So got many interesting answers. I'm very happy that you all are participating aggressively. I'll try to make sure that once this class is over, I'll find out that how would I be able to give permission to my laptop so that I am visible to all of you. Okay. Now, next thing, like why did I calculate? That was the question. 20.25 is an average of all the three scenario. Now, I would be interested in finding out the dispersion. लाइक अगर ये एवरेज है तो ये एवरेज से एक्चुअल रिटर्न्स कितने ऊपर नीचे होते हैं, दैट वी कॉल इट डिस्पर्शन और डेविएशन. सो इफ दिस इज माय एवरेज, ऑन एन एवरेज कितना ऊपर जा सकता है एक्चुअल, इसे कितना नीचे जा सकता है. वी आर ऑलवेज इंटरेस्टेड इन फाइंडिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर थिंग because higher dispersion, lower dispersion, we call it standard deviation also, is very important for any investment decision which is on hand. So that has been the reason ये एवरेज ढूंढना जरूरी है. एवरेज ढूंढना जरूरी है. Fine. So that is to actually get onto the concept of risk. ठीक है, चलो तो अब ये जो मेजर है हमारा उसको हम इंट्रोड्यूस करते हैं. सो वी हैव टू फाइंड आउट average or weighted average, and then and only then we can find out the risk on that particular average. Okay, move further. Let us introduce the concept of standard deviation. So the most common measure of risk are standard deviation and variance of return. However, standard deviation and variance are no different from each other. They are almost the same, only what you can say, one mathematical difference of one mathematical effect. It shows how much variation there is from the average. What does it show? How much variation there is from the average. So if I'm talking about an average, अब average यहाँ पर by definition there can be two types of average. One is mean, जो हमने देखा था simple average using past data, or expected value. It can be a weighted average when I'm using future data. So if there is an average, तो average से कितना ऊपर नीचे हो रहा है, that's what I try to capture. That's what I try to capture. So it shows how much variation there is from the average. A low standard deviation indicates that data points tend to be very close to the mean. What does it indicate? कि अगर देखो मैं आपको दो दिखाता हूँ, एक एवरेज से ये छोटा वाला deviation है, that is big movements, and I simply understand कि जिसमें average से deviations are higher, they tend to be more risky, and lower dispersion leads to lower risk. So that has been the reason. To do this, I actually have to calculate average. That average can be, if data is passed, it can be simple average, or it can be weighted average if data is having probability. This is the concept. That was the reason for finding out average. And standard deviation is calculated on averages. आप समझो, standard deviation is not an isolated measure, should not be looked in isolation as well. When I'm talking about the standard deviation, the next best thing I need to analyze is what's the average on it. It is calculated, right? So that has been the reason. पूरे computation में the most important part is the average on which it is computed. And yes, ये आपको काफी पता भी है, like standard deviation is nothing but square root of variance. Okay, on to the question. Formula है, but as I said कि ये सब formula की हमें जरूरत नहीं है. Let us look at this data and see, intuitive understanding has to be the best. Let me know कि ये दोनों में से कौन सा stock risky है, A और B, without doing any mathematics. right, so all of you have the same answer. Chalo, wonderful. So that means conceptual understanding is really nice. और यही होना चाहिए इनफैक्ट. मैथमेटिक्स तो हम करते रहेंगे, बट यस, जो विजुअल क्लैरिटी है वो भी क्लियर होनी चाहिए. सो यस, व्हाट यू ऑब्जर्व एंड नॉट अ सिंगल आंसर इन फेवर ऑफ स्टॉक ए, दैट इज क्वाइट इंप्रेसिव. परफेक्ट, सुपर, impressive, really. So stock B, as you have rightly said, I've been like some of the answers have better clarity as well, that it is having more fluctuations and all. Yes, correct. I can see the range कि यहाँ पर like the lowest return has been 12 and highest has been 18. Lowest is 12, highest is 18. So मेरा जो dispersion का range है काफी कम है. यहाँ पर lowest is 5, highest is 55. So that clearly says कि मेरा dispersion का range काफी बड़ा है. It's wide, and that has been the reason stock B happens to be risky. Stock B is risky. अब उसको मैथमेटिकली प्रूव करते हैं. हाँ चलो, रिस्क ज्यादा है. So my voice is not coming to you. Amit, audible now? Okay. Okay, let's go. So now we mathematically try to find out deviations. स्टॉक ए का मैं करता हूं, स्टॉक बी का आप करके बताओगे. एंड यस, माय मेथोडोलॉजी इज स्लाइटली डिफरेंट. प्रॉब्ली जो आप सीखे उससे थोड़ा अलग होगा, बेयर विथ मी, बट आंसर इज गोइंग टू बी सेम. करेक्ट. सो मैं पहले लिख लेता हूं रिटर्न्स. मुझे एक्स और एक्स बार लिखना पसंद नहीं है ज्यादा. सो 15, 13, 12 and 18, this have been my returns. Now first thing I know that standard deviation is calculated on average. क्योंकि ये डेटा पास्ट है, I would be using simple average. चलो, total of all, so total कितना आ रहा है? So 15 plus 13 plus 12 plus 18. How much is that total? 58. Correct. And 58 divided by 4, that happens to be, I think, 14.5. 14.5 is my average return, right? I call it average return. अब देखो, डेफिनेशन में जो लिखा था वैसे ही हम करेंगे. स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ट्राइज टू कैप्चर डेविएशन फ्रॉम द मीन. This average return is nothing mean. It tries to capture deviation from the mean. So return minus average return. Average return is my mean value. So 15 minus 14.5 is 0.5. True. Then 13 minus 14.5, that is minus 1.5. 12 minus 14.5, that is minus 2.5. And finally, it is 18 minus 14.5, that is 3.5. Correct. Now, if I make a total of all four, it would be 0. It would be 0. It is 0. But does it mean that there is no risk? Visually मैं देख पा रहा हूं कि रिस्क तो है ही. See, risk कहां पर नहीं है? You try to understand where there is no risk. Where my return minus average return is 0. The points wherein my return minus average return is 0, that is the point I've got no risk. ऐसा कब होगा कि बैंक एफडी की बात करो. बैंक एफडी में मुझे रिटर्न बताया था 5%, तो ईयर 1, 2, 3 सबका 5, एवरेज रिटर्न भी 5. सो रिटर्न माइनस एवरेज रिटर्न इज 0 इन दैट केस. बट यहाँ पर तो मैं विजुअली देख पा रहा हूँ कि एवरेज रिटर्न से 0.5 ऊपर है, 1.5 नीचे है, 2.5 नीचे, 3.5 प्लस है. सो दैट हैज बीन द रीजन. वो प्लस माइनस का एवरेज है, सो प्लस माइनस का नलीफाइंग इफेक्ट हो जा रहा है, एंड दैट हैज बीन, इट इज 0. बट इट इजंट 0. रिस्क तो है, I can visually see, that there is a risk. Fine. हुआ कैसे ऐसा, जीरो क्यों हो गया? Because in simple averages I give equal weight to all the outcomes. देखो मैंने divide by 4 किया, so doesn't it mean that I have multiplied all the returns or all the returns have been given a weight of 0.25? Equal outcome मैंने यहाँ पर use किया है. So that has been the reason. ये हमेशा जीरो ही होते रहेगा, but we have to be once again visually correct होना चाहिए कि ये deviations तो है, तो risk जीरो कैसे हो सकता है? So that is nullifying effect. Okay, so move further. I have to use some mathematical measures through which my positive data remains positive and negative data becomes positive. That's my idea, because अब ये सबको मैं add तो नहीं कर सकता हूँ straight away, so I have to do something so that they become additive to each other. So return minus average return को मैं square कर दे रहा हूँ. That is we normally call it x minus x bar squared. बस वैसे ही हम करते जा रहे हैं. So 0.5 का square is 0.25. Then next is 2.25. It is 2.5 का square आएगा 6.25. Last वाला आप बता दीजिए, the square of 3.25. How much is it? It's 12.25. Okay, done. And if now I make total of all, इसका total करते हैं. This total is 21. Super. This total is 21. Once again, हमने किया क्या वो समझ लेते हैं. Such questions are really big in our examination and we have to be mathematically correct. Mathematically correct हम तभी होंगे जब conceptual correct होंगे. Fine. So we had returns. We have to find out dispersion. So what we did is return minus average return हमने किया. We found dispersions. Return minus average return is dispersion. Next step has been done to make sure that positive remains positive, negative becomes positive. अब जो dispersions थे उसका total कर दिया. So this total as such indicate nothing to me. मुझे तो 4 डेटा है और 4 के डिस्पर्शन का टोटल किया, ये ठीक नहीं है. I have to divide it further so that I find out average dispersion. Right? So ये जो dispersions थे उसका मैंने टोटल किया. अब I am dividing it by 4 to arrive at average dispersion. Right? So if I divide it by 4, my answer is 5.25. Right? So this would be considered as variance. However, there is one more concept. This is called variance. It is called variance, and this is always percentage squared, because हमने ये सब returns जो थे percentage में लिए थे उसको फिर square किए, so it is always indicated as percentage squared. Now understand, the issue here is मैंने divide by 4 किया. Like many a times you will find out equation which says you have to do n minus 1. There is a logic behind. The logic is based on the kind of data you are using. If you are using population data, then divide it by 4 in this particular case. If I'm using sample data, so sample data has a problem that we are not evaluating all the outcomes. So sample should be representative of the population. Understand? Should be. Like sample may not be all the times be representative of the population. Right? So sample may not be representative of population all the times. So that has been the reason. Seema, am I audible to you now? Okay. So if I'm using sample data, then what happens is कि मुझे एक error term देना पड़ेगा because of using the sample. So more often than not, you'll find out it is 4 minus 1. So minus 1 just a moment. हाँ वो रिकनेक्ट हुआ ना इंटरनेट से तो उसने माइक बंद कर दिया ऑटोमेटिक. नो प्रॉब्लम. So now I think I'll just repeat quickly. So I think my voice is now reaching to all of you. Okay. So once again I repeat कि हम सैंपल डेटा पे काम कर रहे हैं. We are working on sample data. So sample data should have that representation error simply. So that has been the reason to add that error margin. To add that error margin, I have to use minus one. Right. So minus one has been considered as a good uh, a way to add the error term. However, I can also use minus two. There is no restriction. But yes, our academics हमारे कोर्स में कहीं पे भी आपको minus two करना नहीं है. In practice, like you go to Wikipedia and read, you'll find out कि yes, minus two भी करने का option तो है हमारे पास. It is not like we can't do that. ठीक है. So it is just adding an error term. So now I can see 21 divided by 3, that is 7. So you can see my variance has increased. If I'm using sample data, definitely population से उसमें variance ज़्यादा आना चाहिए. That is due to that error term. So 7% square is my variance. And finally, मैंने एक extra effect add की थी in the calculation. That was I squared the data. Time to remove it. So I do square root of variance. I'm not using this anymore. I'm using n minus 1 data only. So square root of 7. Square root of 7. How much is it? Yes, 2.65 percentage. That is 2.65 percentage is my standard deviation. Fine. So this is how I can get onto the concept of standard deviation. ये हमारा basic part है. Because आगे हम standard deviation अब detail में नहीं सीखेंगे. This is for the first time. हमने इसको थोड़ा detail में सीख लिया. So this is the dispersion. अब इसका meaning भी आपको सिखाता हूँ कि what exactly it tries to say. So this says my average return is 14.5. My average return is 14.5. When I'm coming to that n minus 1 topic. So my average return is 14.5. It says on an average, it can have a deviation of 2.65. So deviation of 2.65 indicates what? That my average return can have plus 2.65 at a higher side and can have minus 2.65 at lower side. Because ये average deviation या dispersion हमने ढूंढा average return से. True. So this is what we actually try to capture while we calculate standard deviation. So ये average return से 2.65 percentage plus and minus. This is what we try to capture using standard deviation. So this 2.65 is also an average, right? So standard deviation captures average dispersion, average of dispersions, in fact. Now answering Vinaya, Vinaya had a question that yn minus 1, once again repeating, because if I'm using population, I can use divide by 4, so I can take full number of n. But now I'm using a sample, so sample में एक error term तो आएगा ही आएगा. So to ensure that वो error reflect हो, so जानबूझ के मैं मेरा deviation बढ़ा दे रहा हूँ because I'm using sample data. So if I had used population, then my deviation would have been 5.25% variance terms में. But since I've used sample, देखो बढ़ गया, that is 7%. True. That's how it can be captured. Now you have to quickly and super quickly find out for B. तो हम कंपैरिजन कर लेते हैं, then we move further. So we have got answers for B as well. Okay, so let me note down. So सबसे पहले मुझे ये बताइए कि what was that average return for B? B का average return कितना था? Standard deviation data has come to me. So standard deviation is 22.31%. That's correct. But also let me know the average return data, that is 25.5, correct. So 25.5 is average, and deviation on that is 22.31%. So average से 22.31% on an average ऊपर जा सकता है, return can also fall down. And talking about जो A था, so A had a smaller average compared to B. So 14.5 की average थी, and on that we found a deviation of 2.65. वो visually भी था कि A had very less dispersion and B had higher dispersion. So definitely ये दोनों में looking at, like, not comparing many things together, but yes, looking at this we can say that B happened to be risky. Right, so ये उसका exact logic बैठता है. So when I'm doing standard deviation, finding out average, क्या करते हैं, probably the understanding those things have been really very important, because most of the times what we do कि input output हमारा fix होता है, like ये question होता है ऐसे 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 ये step करके we are getting on to the answer. But come on, you are now at a very high level, right? जो BCom में या school level पे हम करते थे वही अभी करते रहेंगे तो कैसे चलेगा, right? So conceptual understanding is really very important now. चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. So I would be sharing this PPT, so probably you can do this question as well. Okay, now how do I solve the question when the data is with probability? And what I have seen कि probability वाले data काफी ज्यादा होते हैं exam में. So see this question. यहाँ पर equal outcome नहीं है. So just by looking at return the way we did in the previous question, वैसे नहीं कर पाएंगे यहाँ पर. I cannot do that way. So चलो अब इसको धीरे धीरे हम solve करते हैं. So I've got probability I would be using as weight. And I will find out standard deviation of A and standard deviation of B. Okay, so how do I, because this doesn't have any writing screen essentially. Is this blank screen visible to you? Yes, I think it must be. है ना? ठीक है, चलो. So data is that key 10, 20, 40, 20, 10. These are the probabilities. So either ही solve करते हैं because that blank screen would create some problems. So first thing I need to find out is return my probability into returns. So what do I do is these are the probabilities. मैं actual में इसको ऐसे लिखूंगा. Expected return. So tell me the weighted average or expected return. This like 16.1 is the common answer. ठीक है चलो. So this is 16.1 is expected return or weighted average. Done. So having done this 16.1 हमारा आ चुका है. So what do I do is थोड़ा space adjust करके मैं लिख रहा हूँ. So these are my returns. Let me write down return minus expected return. Expected return was 16.1. So minus 10 minus 16.1, that is 26.1. This is my first dispersion. Then 15 minus 16.1 is minus 1.10. Then 28 minus 16.1, so it would be 11.9. So correct me if मैं orally कर रहा हूँ. Then 12 minus 16.1, that is minus 4.1. And last one is going to be 5 minus 16.1, that is 11.1 minus. This return minus expected return, and certainly it's not going to be zero. आप देखो ये सबका टोटल करेंगे तो ये जीरो नहीं आएगा, बिकॉज अब यहाँ पर हमने वेट्स जो थे वो बदल दिए. दे आर नॉट इक्वल वेट्स लाइक वी हैड इन नॉर्मल क्वेश्चन, जो पास्ट डेटा वाले क्वेश्चन में किया था. दिस इज द क्वेश्चन विद प्रोबेबिलिटी एंड वी आर यूजिंग प्रोबेबिलिटी एज वेट्स. सो दैट हैज बीन द रीजन ये जीरो नहीं होगा. ठीक है चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. Now same mathematical things we have to do. Return minus expected return square. Return minus expected return square. बताओ quickly. Hmm. 964 point. So 964 ही लिखता हूं मैं. Then 1.1. So that is 1.21 हो जाएगा ये. Then 11.9 squared is 141 point. अच्छा 964 is the total answer. Okay, so I'll just correct it. ठीक है चलो. तो ये स्क्वायर करके हमें इसका टोटल नहीं करना है एक्चुअली स्पीकिंग. सो मुझे स्क्वायर ही बताओ. So squared value was 681. ओके 681 11.9 का स्क्वायर आपने किया, दैट इज 141.61. Then 4.1, that is 16 point, I think 83. 81. Okay. And 11.1, that is 123.21. Okay. Now see, these are the square data. That means मैंने सब plus कर दिया. So whatever negative I had, so I removed negative sign and I am on to the everything plus. Okay. अब probability वाले question में I could read couple of answers after the first one जो हर्ष ने दिया था, then माधवी ने दिया था answer, then I could find out yes कि नहीं, I cannot make a total of all, because if I'm making total of all, it still becomes the simple average concept, wherein I'm using probability as weights. My weight is probability, isn't it? So that has been the reason I simply cannot make a total of it and divide by 4 or 5. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं हो सकता है. I'm using probability as weight here. Hence, I have to find out weighted average once again. So what would I do is, the next step is that probability into return minus expected return squared करना पड़ेगा मुझे. So this is going to be 68.10, then 1.21, that is 0.24, that is going to be 141.61 into 0.4. अच्छा आप मुझे अब इसका total बता दीजिएगा. So let me know the total. Yes, Srikanth has already suggested it is 138.15. Or say 140.69. That's correct. That is only due to decimal point issue. Absolutely correct. So this is actually known as variance. So understand, there is the difference between past data and future data. This is straight away variance because I've already given effect of, right? We have already given effect of weights, and that has been the reason we don't have to divide it by n. So 138.15 is my variance, and similarly I can find out standard deviation. Square root करके सीधा, because मैंने extra ये square का effect दिया था, now it's time to remove it. So now square root of variance, sorry, is standard deviation. And how much is it finally? Yes, 11.75, correct. This is how I can find out standard deviation and variance with future data. B ka up definitely keep it as homework. But yes, return minus expected return, Rahul has a problem. So how it has been? Okay, so our returns, these are the returns. See, minus 10 is my return, and how did I find out expected return? So multiplying probability with return. So वो मैंने already ढूंढ लिया था, 16.1 आया था. That was 16.1. Now in the first place, Rahul, what we did was return minus expected return, that is minus 10 minus 16.1, that is how minus 26.1, and likewise I subtracted 16.1 from all the respective returns. That's how we get the entire data. Fine, so B should not be done now. और फटाफट ये पहला सेक्शन खत्म कर दे, बिकॉज ये बेस है इसलिए हमको इसमें ज्यादा टाइम लगा. नेक्स्ट वी आर स्विचिंग ऑन टू पोर्टफोलियो मैनेजमेंट स्ट्रेट अवे, दैट इज कोवेरिएंस कोरिलेशन, जो कोर पार्ट है एग्जाम का, उस पे हम स्विच ओवर कर देते हैं अभी तुरंत ही. नाउ दिस इज वन मोर क्वेश्चन व्हिच वाज देयर सम टाइम बैक इन एग्जामिनेशन, एंड ऐसे क्वेश्चंस में मोर ऑफन देन नॉट स्टूडेंट्स फंस जाते हैं. look at this. Probabilities are there. Then we have got D, W, and Nifty. Three things have been there. What is so different here? It is rupees per share. That means I've indicated what? Prices. I haven't given you returns. Right, so I haven't been given returns. Now, essay questions, what I have seen is that like while evaluating papers only, ये सीधा का सीधा like students करते ही जाते हैं कि probability into price, expected price, standard deviation, हजारों लाखों में डेटा लेके चले जाते हैं. And that's where things go wrong. So you have done a lot of drudgery, still you are rewarded nothing for it, just for not reading the data properly. Whatever number of questions we have done, उसमें एक important input था. That input was return. हमने सब कुछ return पे किया. Now look at this. What has been provided to us? That is price. So straight away, I cannot start solving the data. इसको मैं सीधा solve नहीं कर सकता. If I start doing it, like इससे ज़्यादा मेहनत वाला काम कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. So first of all, understand कि हमें दिया क्या है. These are the probabilities and different prices. तो समझो कि अलग अलग प्राइसेस नेक्स्ट ईयर के एंड पे होने वाली है, नेक्स्ट 1 year भी है. सो ईयर 1 के एंड पे these are the different prices. Then what is the current price? The present price of stock D is 2800. Present price of stock D is 2800. Okay, so understand कि अभी price 2800 है. Next year it can be possibility one that it can be 4000, it can be 3800, 3400, 3000, and 2500. So I can have 5 different prices next year. I can have 5 different prices next year. Achha, Deepika has a question which I couldn't understand exactly. Nikhil, yes, you should be getting it. And नहीं, क्यूमुलेटिव प्रोबेबिलिटी का काम हमें यहाँ पर नहीं करना है. एंड दीपिका का क्वेश्चन मुझे समझ में नहीं आया कि व्हाट इज दैट, व्हाट इज शी एग्जैक्टली आस्किंग. राइट, ओके, सो आई कैन हैव 5 डिफरेंट प्राइसेस. अब मुझे प्राइसेस से रिटर्न्स ढूंढने हैं. सो इसमें गलती होने के चांसेस बहुत ज्यादा है. सो फर्स्ट रिटर्न आई हेल्प यू फाइंड आउट. सो 4000 minus 2800 divided by 2800 into 100. Now let me know how much is that return quickly. We are definitely not solving the entire question. मैं आपको input सिखा देता हूँ, then you can solve it. It's 42.8%. That is the return. 42.8% is the return. Correct. Now second, if price is 3800, then how much is my return? यहाँ पर आपका थोड़ा टेस्टिंग भी हो जाएगा. And yes, I can see all the answers have been same. That means you have cracked it perfectly. Still, just for validation, I write it once again. कैसे करेंगे? So 3800, and you know our base value every time is 2800 divided by 2800 into 100. And I hope everybody has done that way. Right, so 35.71 is here. Okay, now let me know remaining 3 returns quickly. So batao to, when it is 3400, 3000 and 2500, how much is going to be my return? I'm getting so many different answers. Tough to identify. Is it 21.4 or 26? I think 21.4 is correct. Then next seems to be 7.1. And last is yes, correct. So Harsh has solved the problem. And finally, it is minus 10.7, right? So now returns are ready, and you can move further and find out the standard deviation. And probabilities are there. So the way we did for A in the last question, same methodology can be used here to get the answer. But yes, it's a very important point to remember कि कभी भी आप याद रख लो कि प्राइस दी है तो प्राइस से सीधा क्वेश्चन स्टार्ट करना ही नहीं है. You'll goof up everything. You want return, like make sure that you want returns, and then and only then you can solve it further. So if prices have been given, find a return and then do it. True. So this is one more interesting point. Let's move. Some important points. Return and risk are always calculated through differences in prices. Exactly the same thing which we did. We want returns. It's not on the price we find out the things. We have to find out on returns. Determine whether the data is ex post or ex ante. That means past data and future data. ये आपको find out करना पड़ेगा because calculation difference है, and there is no major job to be done here. If probabilities have been given to you, you can understand it's a future data or else past data. And one more thing, in a probability questions, what we do is we use probabilities as weights. We use probabilities as weights, and that has been the reason हमें end में divide by n करके variance लाने की जरूरत नहीं है. Wherein I am using past data, तभी हमने n-1 किया था, right? So that was the thing, because there we were working on simple averages. In probability we are working on weighted averages, and probabilities are considered to be the weights, right? So that was the reason. Okay, so let's move further and move on to next topic, stock selection. एग्जाम में इसके बेसिस पे क्वेश्चंस होते हैं. Many a times questions have been asked based on this. Just a moment. Okay, so the concept is risk is always calculated on average return. As we know, risk is always calculated on average return. So that has been the reason I simply cannot arrive at any conclusion by looking at standard deviation in isolation. So we do have coefficient of variation, which is known as relative measure of dispersion. और इसके basis पे exam में questions past में पूछे गए हैं. So I'll show you how does it go. पहले basic सिखा देता हूँ, then in proper questions we are going to do it. Fine. Now I've got two stocks, D and W. Standard deviation returns अभी हम ignore करते हैं. This part is to be ignored. I have to make decision only looking at this standard deviation. Standard deviation of D is 6, W is 8. If I have to arrive at a decision, I have to select a particular stock, तो मुझे W ज्यादा risky लगेगा if I look at standard deviation isolation. But now we have just understood, इतने computation, इतना base strong करने का reason वही था that हमें standard deviation variance के concept clear होंगे तो आगे का easily कर पाएंगे. Now standard deviation has no substance without the mean. That's what we understood. Standard deviation has no substance without mean. Mean के बिना standard deviation का interpretation ही नहीं है. Right? So that has been the reason. What we do is कि directly standard deviation से कोई decision नहीं लिया जा सकता है. I have to consider return. So first measure जो मैं use कर सकता हूँ, that is return by risk. return by risk, that means if I take 1% risk, how much is the compensatory return can be found. So return is 8 and risk is 6. So 8 by 6, that gives me 1.33, and 24 by 8 is 3. Because risk is in uh, denominator and return is in numerator, which one is better? Higher is better or lower is better? Suggest. Like between this two, 1.33 and 3, which one is better? Higher is better, lower is better? Waiting for the answers. Higher is better. Correct. Higher is better. So W is having better risk return proposition. जसवंत को थोड़ा मैं sorry, जसवंती, right? I'll want you to correct it slightly because return is in numerator. तो जितना return आपको ज्यादा मिलेगा, the better return against the risk taken will be a better proposition in that case. Now, reciprocal of it, which is used much more in real life, that is called coefficient of variation. It is also known as relative measure of dispersion because alag units of return and standard deviation make most of the times data non-comparable to each other. So that has been the reason मुझे कुछ relative measure पे आना पड़ेगा so that I can end up with a conclusion. So this is to be used in exam. आप exam में यही use करोगे, not the first one. Standard deviation by return, which is having more interpretation or better represent interpretative thing. To earn a percentage return, how much risk should be taken? That is measured by coefficient of variation. Okay, so numerator is standard deviation and denominator is return. So to earn 1%, how much risk is to be taken? Ulta karenge. So in first case, what would I be doing is 6 by 8 and 8 by 24. And definitely इसमें क्योंकि हमने reciprocal किया है, yes, now it's lower. So lower is better. So once again I can say कि better proposition has been offered by W. Okay, there is one more that is based on the William Sharpe's theory. Assume एग्जाम में आपको दिया होगा क्योंकि क्वेश्चन मैंने बनाया है तो इसलिए मैं लिख रहा हूं assume 5% risk free rate. 5% risk free rate assume करते हैं. Now for any return, right? So मेरे return में हमेशा I would have two components. First is risk free rate plus risk premium. My return would have two components. One is risk free rate, another is risk premium. Now decompose करते हैं. 8% जो मेरा रिटर्न मिला उसमें 5% तो रिस्क फ्री है, 5% is risk free, then additional return, right, which is the risky return is 3%. Now understand, risk free namely says that it has got zero standard deviation. To earn risk free return, your standard deviation is zero. So whatever risk has been taken to earn additional 3% in case of D. You're getting this? The risk has been taken to earn additional 3% return. Then this is based on William Sharpe's working. It simply says that I should be subtracting return on investments, return minus risk-free rate divided by standard deviation karo. So which gives us a better idea. Better proposition hai कि I am comparing only the risk premium, that is the risky return compared with risk. So in case of D, it is 3 divided by 6, that is just 0.5. In case of W, it is 24 minus 5 divided by 8, and that happens to be 2.375. Primarily, we understood that W is risky because it had higher standard deviation. But now, looking at all these different parameters, essentially the coefficient of variation and Sharpe's ratio, I can simply say that W offers better compensation. So between these two, W is more rewarding. True. So coefficient of variation and Sharpe's ratio. Sharpe's ratio is actually asked in which chapter? You know, it is not asked in portfolio management chapter. This chapter also has a connection in a chapter called mutual funds. So Sharpe's ratio सब हम यहाँ पर सीखेंगे, but it is actually tested in the chapter called mutual funds. Done. So should you have any doubt here, you can just write in a question so that we can move further. I think nothing is coming, so we move further. And we start with portfolio management properly. Why do we create a portfolio? Why do we create a portfolio? That's the first question. Portfolio is created to reduce risk. Portfolio is created to reduce risk. Now, what's the portfolio? First of all, interesting question or not? Like, हाँ portfolio बनाते हैं, but portfolio होता क्या है? So portfolio simply is a composition of securities, bunch of securities. अब जो भी बताओ. But like I've got a security with me, it's not a portfolio. Now two securities is a portfolio for me, right? So I have to invest in multiple securities, at least more than one, to create a portfolio, and that is the exercise carried on to reduce the risk, not to reduce returns. Understand, it is the exercise carried on to reduce risk. Now I've got a couple of questions which came to me later on, so I'll just be happy to answer those quickly. So for calculating variance, y is square of dispersion divided by n minus 1 and not by n. So question का answer अर्जुन ऐसा है कि like while I am using population data, I should be using n. While I am using sample data, I need to divide it by n minus 1. That n minus 1 concept is there to add that error term or error margin. Yes, and there was only one question. Chalo, Nikhil has better explained the portfolio definition, and yes, very rightly said, it is collection of securities. Well said. Now, portfolio banana, diversification, right? It is not what you can say कि कोई इतना professional skill नहीं है. Like it is very much there in our blood. Like if I give somebody 10 lakh rupees invest karo, will he be investing all money at one place? Absolutely no. Absolutely no. So हमें पता ही है, but probably this term may be new to many of the people in real life also. So layman is also aware about the concept of diversification. Now, अब हमारे एंगल से इसको पढ़ते हैं. So can be achieved by investing in instruments of various companies and can be achieved by investing in different asset classes. Now, different asset classes are namely equity asset class है, debt is an asset class, gold is an asset class, real estate is an asset class, then alternative investments like hedge funds, like private equity, venture capital, ये सब भी अलग-अलग asset classes है. So I would be investing in different asset classes. आप देखो एक आम आदमी का भी investment portfolio check करोगे तो उसमें equity shares शायद होंगे, FDs रहेंगी, real estate होगा, and gold would also be there. So that is how people have been creating portfolios. So these are different asset classes. However, many of the asset classes allow you to invest in multiple securities within the asset class. Say for example, equity. I'm talking about equity. So like I've decided that I would be investing 5 lakh rupees in equity, would not be investing in a single company, isn't it? I would like to invest in shares of multiple companies. So can be achieved by investing in instruments of various companies, and it can also be achieved by investing in different asset classes. But you have to create or construct a portfolio to diversify. ठीक है, अब एक क्वेश्चन में इंट्रोड्यूस करता हूं, and with this single question we would be learning almost the entire chapter. It's a classical question. So if we read it, we find that we are given two climate situations. One is that it can be hot, it can be cold. बहुत ध्यान से, like you must have learned covariance, correlation, portfolio standard deviation, ये सब चीजें हम यहाँ पर करने वाले हैं, right? So we advise कि बहुत ध्यान से आप कर लो, right? और अब कोई जाएगा नहीं क्लास में से, and questions आप पूछते रहिएगा, right? So I've got two climate conditions, and probabilities have been given. Two companies have been given, coffee and ice cream. Now see, if climate is hot, coffee is likely to give me 10% return. Climate is cold, coffee is going to give me 30% return. And exactly opposite kind of return have been given in ice cream. 30% in hot climate and 10% in cold climate. Right, so understandably काफी simple सा question है. Weights को for the time being हम ignore करते हैं. Okay, now if I think of or decide to invest in coffee company, तो इन्वेस्टमेंट करने से पहले हम क्या ढूंढेंगे? सबसे पहले हाउ मच इज माय रिटर्न, वही ढूंढेंगे ना सबसे पहले. लाइक वी आर इंडिविजुअल इन्वेस्टर्स, तो हमें पहले तो रिटर्न चाहिए. रिटर्न के बाद हम रिस्क पूछते हैं. Grishma is raising hand. Anything to share? Okay, no worries. So we move further. Is it visible, Grishma? I think. Question? Okay, done. Okay, so first we would be interested in finding out return. Probability है, returns भी है, so quickly I can find out probability into return. So 0.5 into 10 and 0.5 into 30. So this is 5 and 15. So total is 20% is the expected return on coffee company. Now another side, फिर से इसमें ढूंढ लेते हैं आइसक्रीम कंपनी में कितना है, तो 0.5 and that is, once again I would say it is 15 and 5, that is 20. So agar, like if I am looking at both the companies, दोनों कंपनी का एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न तो सेम है, एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न तो सेम है. If we are exposed to such situation wherein I am having couple of companies which are giving same expected return, but हाँ आप देख तो सकते हो like visually, तो ये clear है कि like कॉफी कंपनी में इन्वेस्ट करते हैं, climate is hot, then I am going to get lesser return. But if I'm investing in ice cream company and climate is cold, once again I am getting lesser return. So ये problem तो है, there is a problem. So that means 20% expected return is not assured. First of all, it is expected return, or 10 or 20 का weighted average है, 10 or 30 का weighted average है. So 20 is not assured. If I'm exposed to such situation, as a layman, what will do? कुछ समझ में नहीं आ रहा है ना, आधा आधा दोनों में इन्वेस्ट कर देते हैं. So I would be investing 50% in coffee company and 50% in ice cream company. दोनों में आधा आधा इन्वेस्ट कर दिया. So I am creating a portfolio. And how to find out return on a portfolio? That is also simply weighted average of individual securities returns. चलो लिखता हूँ इक्वेशन. So return on a portfolio is equal to weighted average ही करना है. There is nothing new. So return on coffee into weight of coffee company in the portfolio plus return on ice cream company and weight of ice cream company in the portfolio, and that is going to give me return on portfolio simply. ठीक है, अब चेक करते हैं कि how much is return on coffee company? 20%. weight of coffee company in the portfolio half, that is 0.5. return on ice cream company weight, दोनों को मिला जुला के 20% is return on portfolio. Now my head should go bust. तीन चीजें हमने इवेल्युएट की. आई इवेल्युएटेड रिटर्न ऑन कॉफी कंपनी, आइसक्रीम कंपनी एंड देन ऑन पोर्टफोलियो. एवरीथिंग गिव्स मी सेम रिटर्न. अब क्या करें? व्हाट शुड बी डन? नाउ स्टूडेंट्स आंसर इज ऑलवेज देयर कि नहीं, पोर्टफोलियो का ही होना चाहिए, पोर्टफोलियो मैनेजमेंट पढ़ रहे, वही बना रहे, तो वही सिलेक्ट होना चाहिए, नॉट इंडिविजुअल कंपनीज. एंड दैट्स ट्रू. बट हाँ, answer should be not based on returns. Answer should be based on risk. Answer should be based on risk. Correct. अब मुझे रिस्क के बेसिस पे डिसीजन लेना है. ठीक है, चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. सो हाउ टू फाइंड आउट रिस्क ऑन इट, तो मैं गिन के बताता हूं जल्दी जल्दी. इसमें let me add one more blank slide and there we go. I'll do it. ठीक है, डेटा इतना आसान है ये क्वेश्चन का जो बहुत इजीली याद रह जाता है. चलो, आई फाइंड आउट कॉफी कंपनी. सो फॉर कॉफी कंपनी probability was 0.5 hot and cold, and returns have been 10 and 30, right? And this is the probability. What I do is I multiply probability with returns. 5, 15, 20. This is known as expected return. This is known as expected return. मुझे क्या ढूंढना है? My objective was to find out risk. चलो, कॉफी कंपनी में कितना रिस्क है वो ढूंढना है, आइसक्रीम कंपनी में कितना रिस्क है वो ढूंढना है, एंड देन फाइनली आई कुड आल्सो बी एनालाइजिंग रिस्क ऑफ अ पोर्टफोलियो सो दैट डिसीजन अब क्लियर हो जाए. रिटर्न माइनस एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न, बस मुझे रिस्क ढूंढना है. रिस्क मीन स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन. ओके, सो 10 minus 20, this 10 minus 20, so that is equal to minus 10 and यहाँ पर होगा plus 10. Return minus expected return squared, 100, 100. And finally on to the last step, that is probability into return minus expected return squared, that is equal to 50, 50, that is equal to 100. This is called straight variance. इसका square root करेंगे तो that is called standard deviation. So risk associated with coffee company is 10%. ठीक है, अब बारी है आइसक्रीम कंपनी की. एंड yes, we'll try to find out whether any of the company has lower risk. कलर चेंज कर देते हैं, चलो पेन का. So probability is 0.5, 0.5. Returns क्लाइमेट लिख देते, चलो तो इजी रहेगा. Returns have been 30 and 10. Okay, now next is probability into returns. This is 15, 5. Expected return has been 20. Return minus expected return. Return minus expected return. So once again देखो, ये मेरे returns है, this is expected return. So 30 minus 20, it is plus 10. This is minus 10. Return minus expected return squared. आपको I think answer clear हो ही गया है. It is much more clear. But फिर भी हम end तक जाएंगे. The probability return minus expected return squared. That is equal to now 50 and 50. Total is 100. That is called variance. And I do square root of it. So tan is equal to standard deviation. Is that clear? अब क्या करें? So I got a thing that company of which the risk is lower to be selected, but unfortunately दोनों company का risk तो same है. And it simply doesn't mean कि भले risk same है ना, let us invest in both the companies or any of the company, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? Because return same है, risk same है. Invest in coffee, invest in ice cream makes no difference. Invest in both the companies make no difference. नहीं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. पहले हम individual company को evaluate करते हैं. See, expected return 20 and with risk of 10. So that clearly says that if I'm investing in coffee company and climate is hot, there is a loss. If I invest in ice cream company and climate is cold, there is a loss because return minus expected return to I'm expecting 20. However, there is a chance that I would be getting 10% less than expectation, 10% more than expectation. So risk to hai. Coefficient of variation. Guys, it's true, Jaswanti, but if I do coefficient of variation, I would be getting no different answer because दोनों का return भी same है, risk भी same है, so that's not going to serve the purpose. दोनों company का coefficient of variation same रहेगा. So selection between these two company is a tough job, really. ये इसमें से तो हम कुछ select नहीं कर सकते. Let's see, हमने जो last एक चीज बनाई थी that was portfolio. Portfolio को check करते हैं. So probability is no different, it is same. It is hot and cold. Now I need to find out returns on portfolio. See here, if climate is hot, then what's the return on the portfolio? So I'll just assume 1000 here. Say for example, we are investing 1000 rupee here. So 500 goes to coffee and another 500 is in ice cream. Getting it? When climate is hot, तो coffee company का return कितना है? 10%. Right? So when climate is hot, coffee company gives me 10% return. So 500 will fetch me 50 rupees. When climate is hot, हम hot climate की बात कर रहे हैं. So in that case, ice cream company will fetch me 30% return, and this should be 150. That 30% on 500. So my total is 200. So I've earned 200 over 1000. That means percentage return is 20%. Okay. Now look at it. कि अगर हम cold climate की बात करें, like I'm talking about cold climate. Just a moment. So coffee company will give me 150, that is 30% के basis पे, and ice cream company will give me 50 on 10% basis. So my total is once again 200 and my return is 20% in both the cases. True? I hope this computation is clear to all of us. Okay, having done that, I can write 20 and 20 at both the places in isolation. Okay, so probability into returns. Next, 10 and 10. 10 and 10. So total expected return is 20. Now return minus expected return. Return minus expected return. That is 0 and 0. अब बताओ, do I need to calculate anything further to find out standard deviation? मैंने कुछ टाइम पहले आपको बताया था, when would my risk be zero? अच्छा, I'm just asking this question once again. Could you get the concept of returns, Rutuja and Seema? कि हमने 20-20%, मैं हाईलाइट कर रहा हूँ, ये 20-20% कैसे ढूंढा? Could you get it? ठीक है, perfect. All right. So what I'm suggesting is कि अब यहाँ पर 0-0 हो गया, and actual return are also 20-20. There is no dispersion and standard deviation is 0. Standard deviation is 0. So this is how we can easily understand कि अब तो portfolio ही select करना चाहिए, because it is giving us the same expected return at the lowest risk. Same expected return at the lowest risk. And that is the essential purpose of creating a portfolio. Portfolio हम बनाते क्यों है? Right, so answer is very simple: to achieve the same targeted return at the lowest risk. ठीक है? Kalyani, अच्छा, you want clarification about returns? ठीक है, चलो. So one more time I'll explain last time. So if I'm investing 1000, so 500 should be invested in coffee and 500 in ice cream, because I'm finding out return on a portfolio. Okay, so if climate is hot, then coffee company का return कितना है hot climate में? check करो यहाँ से, it is 10%. So on 10% basis it should give me 50. And ice cream company का hot climate में return कितना है? 30%. So it should reward me 30 over 50 or 500. So it is 150. Total is 200. So 200 में 1000 पे कमाया. That is 20% return in hot climate. And cold climate is nothing but reverse of it. So both the cases it is 20%. So I hope, Kalyani, it's clear to you. So this is how I can finally arrive at the conclusion. The portfolio is the best proposition here. But my question to you is quite different now. How come risk on portfolio has been 0? दोनों सिक्योरिटीज तो रिस्की है, तो पोर्टफोलियो कैसे रिस्क लेस हो गया एक्चुअली? That is an interesting question to answer. Like I'm having both the securities to be risky, then how come my portfolio risk has been 0? So answer is very simple. अब ये कॉलम चेक करो, पूरे कंप्यूटेशन में सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट जो है, that the most important part is this one, that is the return minus expected return. This is the most important part. See this. Do you see some interesting relationship? राइट, ये दोनों एक दूसरे के रिस्क को काउंटर कर देते हैं, राइट? फिर बिकॉज दे हैव नेगेटिव, चलो, Nikhil has given the ultimate answer, correlation. चलो, perfect. So if one goes up, other security goes down. हर्ष का आंसर है loss from one is set up from another. Wonderful. चलो, तो ये कॉन्सेप्ट सही आपने पकड़ लिया है. So it says that my expected return is 20. ठीक है? So sorry, portfolio expected return 20 है. Now one of the security say gives 10% lesser than expected. At the same time, जो other half है, it is giving me 10% plus. So you can see minus 10 plus 10 nullified. So ultimately I'm left with which one? Expected number only. Same यहाँ पर plus 10 है, ये -10 है, so I'm once again having that nullifying effect, and same as you rightly said, ये set off हो जाता है एक दूसरे के सामने, and what I am getting is only the expected return. So that has been the reason, whatever had been the climate condition, मुझे expected return मिल गया because of that nullifying effect, right? So as you rightly identified, like correlation, ये सब बातें यहाँ पर हो चुकी है. So अब आगे बढ़ते, right? So can I move further? Because as I move further, ये लिखा हुआ चला जाएगा. So I would, it's okay that I move further. Done. चलो. So ये हमारा काम हो गया. Right? This is also done. मैंने कर दिया. Okay. How do I find out risk of the portfolio? जो हमने manually किया था, वो manually हम equation से कैसे करेंगे? So if you look at this formula closely, you will find out no difference than simplification of this formula, a plus b whole square. So how do we understand this? This a square plus b square plus 2ab. See, I'm not getting into derivation of this formula. Like if time had permitted, probably ये सब R&D कर सकते थे, but it has got no simply examination relevance. Exam में तो ये formula हमारे लिए काम की है. Right, so it is say you, how do you remember it? So you can see this is having a close resemblance with this particular formula, but something new has been here, that is called covariance. ये कुछ नया है हमारे लिए. So let us try to identify what is covariance. So covariance measures the degree to which return on two risky assets move in tandem, that is one behind another, one after another. So correlation हमें ये सिखाता है कि एक सिक्योरिटी ऊपर की ओर मूव हुई, so there is a positive change. What is going to be the corresponding change in another security? So will it also go up or will it fall? So outcome of covariance has been quite easy to find out. Covariance के दो ही outcome होते हैं, either it can be positive or it can be negative, because it only lets us know the direction, nothing more than that. So covariance अगर positive है तो meaning क्या हुआ? If one security goes up, another also goes up. That is an indication of positive covariance. What is negative covariance? If one security falls down, another also falls down. तो ये क्या हुआ? Negative है या positive है? ये आप पे क्वेश्चन पास ऑन करता हूँ, फिर मैं आंसर करता हूँ. चलो, मैंने आपको ऐसे बताया कि if one security goes up, another goes up, positive covariance. If one goes down, another also falls down. बताओ ये पॉजिटिव कोवेरियंस होगा या नेगेटिव? यस, आंसर इज राइट, स्टिल पॉजिटिव. मस्त है, बिकॉज दोनों सेम डायरेक्शन में जा रहे हैं. सो सेम डायरेक्शन में ऊपर, सेम डायरेक्शन में नीचे, दे स्टिल कैरी पॉजिटिव कोवेरियंस. वंडरफुल. एंड नेगेटिव मींस जो हमने आइसक्रीम कॉफी में ढूंढा वैसा. इफ वन गोज अप, another falls down, that is called negative covariance. Correct. Now my one more question to you is that covariance range bound? Is that covariance range bound measure? Right, वो आप मुझे बताइएगा. मैं अब यहाँ पर covariance का formula दिखाता हूँ. Right, this is the formula to find out covariance, and as I said, I'm not big fan of formula, तो हम सीधा ही ढूंढ लेते हैं. So let us solve it. जो चेंज वाला कॉलम था, वो चेंज वाले कॉलम की हमें जरूरत है. सो दिस एक्चुअली कॉफी का है ये. सो रिटर्न माइनस एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न ये कॉफी का है, एंड दिस इज रिटर्न माइनस एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न ऑफ आइसक्रीम है. ठीक है. नाउ आई हैव टू मल्टीप्लाई बोथ द चेंजेस. I have to multiply both the changes and then I have to do averaging of it. तो weighted average के लिए मेरे पास probability तो है. So what do I do is, this is 1, 2 and 3. So changes, that is the dispersions, have been multiplied with the corresponding probability. So my first answer is minus 50. देखो, minus 10 into 10, that is 100 into 0.5, minus 50, minus 50, and total जो मेरा आया 100 is covariance. Minus 100 is my covariance, and I've got only one answer related to that, कि whether this covariance is range bound or not. Is that the minus 100 the lowest possible covariance? What do you say? ठीक है, अब ये कोवेरियंस जो है उसको हम इक्वेशन में सेट करते हैं. अब इक्वेशन, मैं इक्वेशन लिखता हूं, आंसर तो मैंने नीचे लिखा हुआ है. सो इट इज वेरियंस ऑफ कॉफी, standard deviation square is variance of coffee into weight of coffee squared. And what am I finding out is variance of portfolio. Be precise, I am finding out variance of portfolio plus once again ice cream का variance into weight of ice cream squared plus 2 into covariance into weight of coffee into weight of ice cream. This is the equation which I have to solve. And finally, it is 100 into 0.25, that is 25 plus 25 minus 50, and this will be 0. So my risk on portfolio, हमने equation से किया तो भी 0 है. So we have introduced one interesting measure that is called covariance, and covariance calculation is utterly important when it comes to calculating beta. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेजर जो हमारे पास सीखने में आएगा दैट इज कोरिलेशन. मैंने क्वेश्चन पूछा था थोड़ी देर पहले कि कोवेरियंस क्या रेंज बाउंड है. वी हैव गॉट one answer no, another answer is yes, so there is a tie, only couple of answers. Is that minus 100 the lowest level of covariance? That was one more question. Yes, chalo. So Harsh ka answer aa gaya is to add one more. No, correct. Covariance is not a range bound measure. So it can be say minus 200, minus 250 भी हो सकता है. Positive side bit can be anything. It's not a range bound measure first of all. So that has been the reason. इससे हमें कुछ ज्यादा पता नहीं चलता है. What we understand is only uh, the direction, like where do they go, means are they going together or are they moving in opposite direction. That's what I can know from it, nothing much. So to refine covariance, we do have one more measure that is called correlation, so that it is a range bound measure. Chalo, there's a variance on a portfolio. Does it mean dispersion from the expected return of all the securities in the portfolio put together? Yes, absolutely correct, Samir. So I would say it is indicating dispersion from the expected return of the portfolio. Done. Now correlation is a refined version of covariance. एकदम normal language में बताए तो. And here I am making an effort to make the covariance range bound, so it has got more interpretive value. ठीक है, so कैसे ढूंढते वो तो हम देखते बाद में, but yes, correlation coefficient is a range bound measure which is -1 to +1 के रेंज में आता है. So if it is -1, it indicates perfectly negative correlation. So इसका intuition कैसा हुआ? If one security has a change of +10, right, another security has a change of -10. So this is perfectly negative correlation. पॉजिटिव मीन्स +1 आए, बिकॉज हमारे एग्जाम में कई बार वो सीधा ऐसे ही छोड़ देते हैं कि टू सिक्योरिटीज हैव पॉजिटिव कोरिलेशन. सो पॉजिटिव कोरिलेशन व्हेन दे राइट वी हैव टू टेक +1. ऐसे कुछ क्वेश्चंस में आपको लिखा हुआ मिलेगा. नॉर्मली दे शुड हैव रिटर्न, और कई बार परफेक्ट कोरिलेशन. तो परफेक्ट कोरिलेशन में क्या लेंगे, -1 या +1. सो वो भी कुछ कंफ्यूजन बने रहते हैं. सो पॉजिटिव कोरिलेशन talks about security return move in the same direction, that is +10 and +10. अच्छा, तो अब मुझे ये आप बताओ कि which is a better idea to create a portfolio, having securities with positive correlation or negative correlation? So if I'm creating a portfolio, which kind of securities should I be having in my portfolio? Yes, very rightly said. It is negative, because that gives me better diversification opportunity. However, जो -1 है ऐसा रियल लाइफ में एग्जैक्टली होता भी नहीं है. So I'll guide you. कैसे? अच्छा, अब uncorrelated says that one security goes up by 10%. What is the corresponding change in another security? बताओ. See, any direction, ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है. Now तपस्वी, the question was that कि अनकोरिलेटेड है और एक सिक्योरिटी में चेंज +10 है, तो दूसरे में क्या चेंज होगा? सो अगर मान लो कि दूसरे में -10 हुआ तो वो नेगेटिव कोरिलेशन है, प्लस में कुछ भी हुआ तो पॉजिटिव कोरिलेशन है, तो अनकोरिलेटेड थोड़ी बता सकते हैं. सो अनकोरिलेटेड मीन्स एक में चेंज होने से दूसरे में चेंज नहीं है. There is no change. So I can give a good example of, say, equity shares and FD. Say half of my money has been invested in equity shares and other half has been invested in FD. Equity shares keep on changing. Will FD return change along with change in equity? Answer is no. So ये दोनों के बीच में कोवेरियंस ही मेरा 0 आएगा, बिकॉज एक में चेंज होने से दूसरे में चेंज होता ही नहीं है. सो कोवेरियंस 0 आएगा, एंड बाय वर्च्यू ऑफ दैट my correlation will also be 0. No change. So that's the idea. Now R squared is coefficient of determination. इसको मैं आपको बताता हूँ when we reach to systematic unsystematic risk calculation. अच्छा, how do I find out? अच्छा, what's the difference between covariance and correlation? See, difference तो नहीं है, but interpretation में difference है. Covariance only gives you that positive या negative values. That means it is very tough to interpret. Wherein अगर कोवेरियंस में मुझे इतना इंटरप्रिटेशन लाना है कि दो सिक्योरिटी बहुत ही ज्यादा कोरिलेटेड है या कम कोरिलेटेड है, तो वो आंसर मुझे कोवेरियंस से मिलना रिलेटिवली डिफिकल्ट है, बिकॉज वो रेंज बाउंड ही नहीं है. सो क्या सिक्योरिटी ए और बी और ए और सी के बीच के कोवेरियंस से वो इंटरप्रिटेशन लाना डिफिकल्ट है. बट व्हेन आई ब्रिंग इन कोरिलेशन, थोड़ा रिफाइन कर देते हैं कोवेरियंस को, तो इट बिकम्स इजियर फॉर मी टू आइडेंटिफाई कि अगर दो सिक्योरिटीज एक के आसपास, सो से फॉर एग्जांपल इफ आई ड्रॉ समथिंग लाइक दिस, तो दैट विल गिव बेटर क्लैरिटी कि अगर 0 से हम शुरू करते हैं और 0 से +1, सो ऑल दो सिक्योरिटीज विच आर हैविंग से 0.5 से लेके 1 के बीच में, यहाँ पर जस्ट फॉर अंडरस्टैंडिंग पर्पस, जो भी सिक्योरिटीज का कोरिलेशन ये रेंज में आएगा, वी कैन अंडरस्टैंड कि ये सब का कोरिलेशन ज्यादा होगा. Means they are highly correlated with each other. So if one has to change, another would also change almost in the same direction. In the same direction, but magnitude is also going to be same. ठीक है. Another is कि अगर ये साइड है तो आई कैन से लेस कोरिलेटेड, तो एक में चेंज होने से दूसरे में यस डायरेक्शन इज सेम बट परसेंटेज चेंज इज गोइंग टू बी लेसर. सो कोवेरियंस कोरिलेशन में इंटरप्रिटेशन में डिफरेंस आता है. दिस कोरिलेशन गिव्स अस बेटर इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ द कॉन्सेप्ट. अब और एक था क्वेश्चन. सो दिस इज कोरिलेशंस. आर वी टॉकिंग अबाउट मार्केट रिटर्न लाइक निफ्टी? नो, it can be between any two securities. Like I can find out correlation between Infosys and Wipro. I can find out correlation between Infosys and Nestle. Possible hai. So it is between two securities. However, if I want to find out correlation with market, that is possible. हाँ, coefficient of determination इसलिए मैंने skip कर दिया समीर, to answer your question कि उसमें हमें correlation market के साथ ढूंढना है, इसलिए that is Nifty. ओके, चलो अब एग्जाम पर्सपेक्टिव फिर से लाते हैं. हाउ डू आई फाइंड आउट correlation? So it is covariance divided by standard deviation of ice cream and standard deviation of coffee. So in our case covariance was -100. Standard deviation ice cream का कितना था? 10. Coffee का कितना था? 10. So finally I've ended up with -1 correlation, and that is much more known to us. That is much more known to us कि हमने already वो change column में exactly nullifying effect देखा था. So that is the characteristic of -1 correlation. अच्छा, if I say change this equation, मैं ऐसे लिखना चाहूँ तो लिख सकते हैं covariance is equal to correlation between ice cream and coffee into standard deviation of ice cream and say into standard deviation of coffee. If I write this way, is that possible? Yes. मैथमेटिकल जगलिंग ही किया है ना हमने, नथिंग मच. सो दैट इज पॉसिबल. सो इसीलिए वी डू हैव वन मोर इक्वेशन टू सॉल्व. ये आपकी चॉइस है कि ओरिजिनल इक्वेशन में क्या था, +2 कोवेरियंस था. अगर आप वैसे ही सॉल्व करना चाहते हो तो कर सकते हो. तो वो केस में आपको सबसे पहले अगर क्वेश्चन में कोरिलेशन दिया है तो फाइंड आउट कोवेरियंस एंड देन यूज दैट ओल्डर इक्वेशन. और एल्स इफ यू वांट टू स्ट्रेट want to plug in those value here, correlation की value आप यहीं पे plug in करना चाहते हो तो ये भी कर सकते हो, because I know कि ये तीनों का multiplication भी covariance ही है. So in that case my equation becomes slightly longer. It is 2 correlation into standard deviation of ice cream and standard deviation of coffee into weight of ice cream and weight of coffee. That's how it's going to go. ठीक है. So ये आप पे है कि आपको किस तरह से question solve करना है, that you have to decide. ओके, सो इसका भी आंसर 0 ही आएगा. ओके, नाउ गेट ऑन टू सम ऑफ द इंटरेस्टिंग क्वेश्चंस. फटाफट लास्ट हाफ एन आवर. अब रैपिड फायर में हमें न्यूमेरिकल्स करने, बिकॉज एक मिनिमम वेरिएंस पोर्टफोलियो की थ्योरी को छोड़ के बाकी सब तो क्वेश्चंस. आई विल गाइड यू अबाउट ऑल डिफरेंट क्वेश्चंस. assume 3 have to be selected, state which one is to be picked. मुझे ए से लेके एफ तक जितने भी स्टॉक्स है उसमें से 3 सिलेक्ट करनी है. हाउ डू आई सिलेक्ट? चलो आप मुझे कैसे सिलेक्ट करेंगे वो बताओ, तब तक मैं समीर का क्वेश्चन पढ़ लेता हूं. Samir, it can be like anything. Like one can move up by 10%, another can fall down by -5. That's absolutely okay, and that is a negative correlation. -10 दूसरे में चेंज होगा तो that is an example of perfectly negative. But perfectly positive and perfectly negative, like you know that it is very tough to find in real life. You can have what you can say positively correlated returns and negatively correlated returns, but perfectly तो either side नहीं होता है. So आपने जो पहले पूछा कि एक में +10 दूसरे में -5, ये बेटर है उससे. चलो और इतने ज्यादा आंसर आ गए तब तक ठीक है. लेट्स सी. पोर्टफोलियो रिस्क, रिस्क एंड रिटर्न, सुपर. सो अब हमारे पास ये अच्छा आंसर भी आ गया. दैट्स वंडरफुल. ए, सी एंड ई have to be selected. Wow. So the question to be solved using coefficient of variation, that is risk by return. जो lowest होगा that is to be selected. And yes, I'm going by your answers as it has been suggested. A, C and E है या A, B, E है? I've got two different answers and some more. हाँ हायर लो, चलो मैं लिख ही देता हूँ. So that is going to serve the purpose. ये 0.5 है. This is 5 divided by 8 happens to be, बहुत ज्यादा आंसर्स है और अलग अलग है. 0.625. ओके चलो थैंक यू. ये 1 है, ये भी 1 है. Now 5 by 9. I think it is going to be 0.55 and another is F, that is 0.75. Okay चलो correct it. क्योंकि रिस्क न्यूमरेटर में है, we have to select the one which is having the lowest value. तो सबसे पहले मैं सिलेक्ट करूंगा A, उसके बाद सिलेक्ट करूंगा E एंड उसके बाद सिलेक्ट करूंगा B. So my correct selection is A, B and E. चलो so बहुत ज्यादा आंसर्स थे हमारे पास. We have got so many different values also. And yes, A, B, E have been the correct. ठीक है. Now next question it talks about is assuming perfect correlation. देखो मैंने बताया और तुरंत ही आ गया. So this has been our exam question only. So assuming perfect correlation, तो ये perfect हम क्या assume करेंगे? Perfect नेगेटिवली करेंगे या पॉजिटिव? तो इसका सिंपल आंसर है, अगर नेगेटिव होता है तो लिख के ही देना पड़ेगा. सो नेगेटिव कभी अज्यूम नहीं किया जा सकता है. सो +1 हम यहाँ पर अज्यूम कर सकते हैं. So whether it is preferable to invest 75% in A and 25% in C or invest in E, तो E का तो हमें पता है 0.55 है. Okay, I have to find out. Now I am creating a portfolio. चलो तो return on portfolio का इक्वेशन रखते हैं. Return on portfolio is equal to return on the securities have been A into weight of A plus return on C and into weight of C. बताओ तो रिटर्न्स कितनी आती है? जस्ट वेटेड एवरेज मल्टीप्लाई क्विकली एंड लेट मी नो. 9%. We have got the answer as well. It is 9%. तो रिटर्न ऑन पोर्टफोलियो इज 9%. तो ई का भी तो रिटर्न 9% है ना. तो पोर्टफोलियो का रिटर्न 9%, ई का भी रिटर्न 9% है. सो दैट मींस डिसीजन शुड बी मेड प्योरली बेस्ड ऑन रिस्क. चलो लेट अस फाइंड आउट रिस्क ऑफ द पोर्टफोलियो. इक्वेशन में रखता हूं, वैल्यूज आप ढूंढ के दोगे. इट इज वेरियंस. अंडरस्टैंड, जो भी आंसर आएगा हमें इवेंचुअली उसका स्क्वायर रूट करना है. इट इज वेरियंस ऑफ पोर्टफोलियो इज इक्वल टू वेरियंस ऑफ ए into weight of A squared plus variance of C into weight of C squared. अब यहां पर मैं डायरेक्टली पूरे ही इक्वेशन में वैल्यू रख देता हूं. आई एम यूजिंग कोरिलेशन ओनली. सो 2 into correlation is 1 into standard deviation of A is equal to 4. Standard deviation of C is equal to 12 into weight of A is equal to 0.75 and weight of C is equal to 0.25. That has been big equation now. Or else you could have straight away found the covariance by multiplying these three in isolation. It would have been 48. No problem. मुझे चलो रिस्क बताओ पोर्टफोलियो का. I want standard deviation of portfolio from you. We have got the answer कि standard deviation 6% ठीक है. 6% standard deviation is correct. बाकी सबके स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशंस काफी अलग दिख रहे हैं ना। All of us get on to common standard deviation of 6%. If it's not happening, नहीं आ रहा है तो मुझे बताओ, I'll be happy to solve. But standard deviation is 6. ठीक है. So now finally getting on to this selection part. Selection part says that कि portfolio का standard deviation 6 है और E का standard deviation 5 है. Right, so getting it. E is definitely a better choice here. Reason behind both the things, like portfolio and E both are generating same returns but at different level of risk. E is better, portfolio isn't. Question clear? एग्जाम का क्वेश्चन है. So I think कुछ कंफ्यूजन है तो क्विकली मुझे लिख के दे दो, otherwise we move further, because अब नेक्स्ट टॉपिक जो मुझे सिखाना है that is minimum variance portfolio, that is also tested like anything in. अच्छा, इनका नॉट मैचिंग है, ठीक है, चलो मैं सॉल्व करके देता हूँ. सो वेरिएंस ऑफ ए मुझे चाहिए, सो 16 इंटू 0.75 का स्क्वायर करना है मुझे, प्लस सी है तो दैट इज 144, 12 का स्क्वायर करके मैं लिख रहा हूँ, एंड 0.25 का स्क्वायर करना है मुझे, प्लस 2 इंटू 48 इंटू 0.75 इंटू 0.25. बस अब आपको ये सॉल्व करना है और ये करने से आपका आंसर आई थिंक 36 आएगा. दिस इज variance of portfolio and standard deviation is 6%. Arjun, I appreciate your comments. कल हम स्टेट्स नहीं पढ़ेंगे. टुमारो विल चेंज द टॉपिक. कल डेरिवेटिव्स ले लेना है और इसमें जो भी थोड़ा बाकी रहता है वो कर लेते हैं. बस डेरिवेटिव्स में ऑप्शंस के प्राइसिंग और वो सब चीजें हम सीखेंगे. बट यस, मैं ऐसे ही पढ़ाता हूँ, लाइक माय क्लासेस गो ऑन लाइक दैट ओनली. सो अहमदाबाद चैप्टर में भी हम ऐसे ही पढ़ते हैं, पकड़ 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 के इतना माइनर काम करते हैं, and that is to be needed at this time. ठीक है, सो ये 6% आ गया. मूव फर्दर. ये क्वेश्चन हम सीखते हैं. I'll just try to guide you with this particular question. ये दिसंबर 2007 में क्वेश्चन पूछा गया था, and this has been one of the unique question जो आज के बाद एक भी बार पूछा नहीं गया. Means after this date it has never been asked. So it is a cherry picked question. Now this question has something interesting to learn and understand. It says that कि probability for security X has been given to us, security Y has been given to us, और आप देखो बहुत ध्यान से, probabilities have been different. Very smartly placed question. मुश्किल नहीं है. Shrikant, what you can do is जो आप वो क्वेश्चन था, you can just try to solve it once again. If it doesn't happen, let me know tomorrow. मैं इसको फिर से सॉल्व करूंगा and we'll try to get the answer. Now in this particular question, what was so interesting कि probability जो है they have been different for both the securities. I compare, देखो इसको अब मैं compare करके दिखाता हूँ why this question is so different from others कि if I show you some big questions कि यहाँ पर आके see this is the question, probability same और price change होती है, then this all have been our different exam questions, the probability same returns change होती है, and some of the classic questions जो आपको एग्जाम में बहुत ज्यादा पूछे गए हैं, so you can see return forecast and yes these are the typical format of questions and probabilities same and returns have been different. सब monotonous questions आपको मिलेंगे, probabilities and returns, see this. तो ये सब में एक common theme चलती है, most of the questions in our examination go on a common theme that you are given probabilities and then returns, wherein we do have only one question of a kind, or I think they should have repeated many times but पूछा नहीं कि इसको अब हैंडल कैसे करेंगे। तो ये क्वेश्चन मैं पढ़ के बताता हूं आपको। सी इफ दिस इज आस्क्ड तो भी उतना ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, पूरा तो हम डेफिनेटली नहीं करेंगे, नहीं तो हमारा पूरा बाकी का आधा टाइम खत्म हो जाएगा ये करने में, बट आई कैन गाइड यू डेफिनेटली। इंडिविजुअली हमें दोनों सिक्योरिटी का रिटर्न पूछा है, एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न, राइट। सो कैलकुलेट एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न ऑन ईच सिक्योरिटी, वो हम ढूंढ सकते हैं सेपरेटली, and portfolio comprising 60 and 40% of both the securities. So I can find out expected return इसका, I can find out expected return Y का, तो possible है। And then I can combine 60 and 40 of both and I can find out expected return on portfolio। ये पहला क्वेश्चन तो मेरा क्लियर हो गया, ठीक है। सो फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन, लेट इट बी डिफरेंट प्रोबेबिलिटी, व्हाट डिफरेंस डज इट मेक, सॉल्व हो गया। सेकंड पार्ट, कैलकुलेट एक्सपेक्टेड रिस्क ऑफ ईच सिक्योरिटी, दैट इज आल्सो इजी। मुझे एक्स का रिस्क सेपरेटली ढूंढना है, वाई का रिस्क सेपरेटली ढूंढना है, तो वो भी मैं ढूंढ सकता हूं, दैट इज आल्सो इजी, वो तो बहुत आसान है। एंड देन फाइनली दे आर आस्किंग मी टू फाइंड आउट रिस्क ऑफ अ पोर्टफोलियो, ठीक है। स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन मुझे ढूंढना है ऑफ द पोर्टफोलियो एज वेल। तो अगर मैं स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन ऑफ पोर्टफोलियो का इक्वेशन रखता हूं तो इट इज जो एक्स का स्क्वायर चाहिए, फिर इसका इंटू वेट का चाहिए, देन सिमिलरली फॉर वाई, प्लस मुझे चाहिए 2 इंटू कोवेरियंस। हाउ डू आई फाइंड आउट कोवेरियंस बिटवीन टू सिक्योरिटीज when I do have different probabilities? Because मैंने जो सिखाया था आपको उसमें ऐसा probability into return minus expected return x का चाहिए and return minus expected return y का चाहिए। So this is how I can find out covariance, but ये क्वेश्चन में तो ऐसा है ही नहीं, I've got different probabilities। तो अब पोर्टफोलियो रिस्क जो हम टिपिकल इक्वेशन मेथड से ढूंढ लेते थे वेरिएंस ऑफ पोर्टफोलियो करके, वैसे नहीं आने वाला है, and that is you can see only one part of the question। तो how do I find out portfolio risk? So इसको मैं अलग एंगल से सॉल्व करता हूं, थिंक आउट ऑफ द बॉक्स। मैं पोर्टफोलियो के रिटर्न्स ढूंढता हूं अलग अलग, जस्ट हिंट देता हूं, सिक्योरिटी एक्स में कितना परसेंटेज है, 60%, और सिक्योरिटी वाई में कितना परसेंटेज है, 40%, एंड यू कैन इजीली फाइंड आउट दिस क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम द स्कैनर, एंटायर सॉल्यूशन। बट रिटर्न्स ढूंढते हैं, से फॉर एग्जांपल मैं अज्यूम करता हूं, पहले यहां पर इसको फिक्स्ड कर देते हैं, 0.3 फिक्स्ड कर देते हैं और यहां पर चेंज करते हैं, ठीक है। सो फर्स्ट रिटर्न इज दैट कि 0.3 प्रोबेबिलिटी एंड 0.2, तो कितना होगा 0.3 इंटू 0.2, 0.3 इंटू 0.2। सो मेरे पास प्रोबेबिलिटी, पहली जॉइंट प्रोबेबिलिटी आई, दैट इज 0.06 एंड रिटर्न इज, अब इसका देखो 30 का 0.6 और सामने 50 का 0.4, so this is equal to 18 and this is equal to 20. So 0.06 प्रोबेबिलिटी है कि मुझे रिटर्न 38 मिलेगी। ठीक है, फिर अब ये कांस्टेंट करते हैं, अब इसको चेंज करते हैं, अब यहां पर आते हैं। So 0.3 into 0.6, that is equal to 0.18 is the probability, and return, अब ये नहीं, this into 0.4, that is equal to, this is 12. So मेरे पोर्टफोलियो का रिटर्न कितना हो सकता है? 18 plus 12, that is equal to 30. So likewise, मैं तीन के इसको पहले हमने कांस्टेंट कर दिया, then find out the returns, then once again अब 0.4 लेके फिर से 3 करो, 0.3 लेके फिर से यहां पर 3 चेंज करो. So I would be having total, how many sets getting created? 3 sets, and every set would have 3 such values. पहली probability हमने कितनी ढूंढी? 0.2, that's a 0.06, then 0.18, and then finally once again 0.06 का एक सेट होगा, फिर another probability का सेट होगा 0.08, then 0.24, and further 0.08, and then find out corresponding returns. फिर से मैन्युअली हो जाए ऐसा क्वेश्चन रखा है उन्होंने, भले ही लंबा है, कॉन्सेप्ट इज इंटरेस्टिंग. देन फिर से 0.06, 0.18, and last is once again 0.06, so that you can write. मेरा स्क्रीन खत्म हो गया है यहाँ पर, and then I can find list down corresponding returns. तो अब मेरे लिए ये क्वेश्चन पहले जो स्टैंडर्ड फॉर्मेट में था वैसे हो गया, प्रोबेबिलिटी है, रिटर्न है, बस अब आगे चलाते जाओ, फाइंड आउट स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन ऑफ द पोर्टफोलियो एंड यू विल गेट द आंसर. सो मेक श्योर ये काफी यूनिक क्वेश्चन है, राइट? और एक बार तो आपको एग्जाम में शॉक में कर देगा कि बिकॉज यू वुड बी सॉल्विंग इट ट्रेडिशनली, हाउ डू यू फाइंड आउट स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन व्हेन थिंग्स आर डिफरेंट? कॉन्सेप्ट इज गुड. So try to solve this. If it doesn't happen, so let me know. Then this is one more question. Coefficient of correlation मुझे दिया गया है 0.15. I have to invest 1 lakh rupees. 2 securities B and D have been given to me, and अलग-अलग combinations मुझे दिए. So I am given the concept like invest 100% in B only, 50% in B and D both, then 75% in B and 25% in D. Likewise, I have been given different combinations. What they are asking me to find out is portfolio returns as well as risk, right? So ये तो मेरे पास already readily available है ही है. नेक्स्ट थिंग आई वुड बी फाइंडिंग आउट कि अगर 50-50% दोनों में इन्वेस्टमेंट करता हूं तो रिटर्न ऑन पोर्टफोलियो कितना होगा. सो आई कैन से 10 और 18 का 50-50% दोनों में इन्वेस्ट करेंगे तो रिटर्न 14 आएगा. आई वुड फाइंड आउट स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन, फिर इसमें भी मुझे रिटर्न ऑन पोर्टफोलियो ढूंढना है, फाइंड आउट स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन. सो लाइकवाइज मैं सब लिस्ट करूंगा. सो आई वुड बी हैविंग एट द एंड ऑफ इट 5 रिटर्न्स एंड 5 स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशंस in this particular question. 5 returns and 5 standard deviations. इतना डेटा हमारे पास आ गया. Then finally we have to select best combination. Then best combination will come from coefficient of variation. Right? तो ये अब आपके लिए सिंपल हो गया कि हर एक पॉइंट के लिए आप रिटर्न ऑन पोर्टफोलियो ढूंढो, स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ढूंढो, and then find out CV, the one which has the lowest, go ahead with that. So that combination happens to be the best. So this is also a good question to solve. Easy है, but थोड़ा different है. One more concept which is more often tested in examination, that is called minimum variance portfolio. Look at this one. Say for example security X and security Y. ये दो securities मैंने यहाँ पर identify की है. If I'm investing, and this says I'm investing 100% in security X and this is 100% in security Y, तो मेरे पोर्टफोलियो का रिस्क इसका इतना है, इसका कहीं पे इतना है, right? So I've got standard deviation of x, standard deviation of y, आइसोलेटेड दिया गया है। अब दोनों सिक्योरिटी के बीच में कुछ कोरिलेशन भी होगा, देयर वुड बी सम कोरिलेशन। तो उसके लिए मुझे क्या चेक करना पड़ेगा, आई विल बी फाइंडिंग आउट डिफरेंट कॉम्बिनेशन, से फॉर एग्जांपल 99% इन x, 1% इन y, likewise I keep on arranging different combinations, यहाँ पर भी अलग अलग कॉम्बिनेशन हमारे पास आते ही जाएंगे। what would happen is, कई बार ऐसा भी होता है कि जो ये लाइन है वो सीधी की सीधी आपकी यहां से इधर आ गई, सिंपल। सो इट सेज दैट कि ये दोनों में कोई मिनिमम वेरिएंस पोर्टफोलियो नहीं बन सकता है, दोनों में से जिसमें कम रिस्क है उसी में इन्वेस्ट कर दो, पॉसिबल है। कई बार ऐसा भी हो सकता है, लाइक इफ यू ट्राई टू ड्रॉ दिस यू विल फाइंड आउट कि कुछ ऐसे होगा। सो इट फॉल्स डाउन टू एन एक्सटेंट, फिर यहां से आके फिर से वो जंप होना शुरू हो जाएगा एंड देन इट वंस अगेन रीचेस एट दिस पॉइंट। अगर ऐसा कुछ होता है हमारे लिए, सो दिस इज व्हाट वी आर एक्चुअली लुकिंग फॉर। सो व्हाट इज हैपनिंग कि अगर मैं दोनों सिक्योरिटी के बीच में अलग अलग कॉम्बिनेशंस करते जा रहा हूं अप टू सर्टन एक्सटेंट, लाइक ये कॉम्बिनेशंस बढ़ाया मींस मैंने सिक्योरिटी वाई बढ़ाई 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 एंड अप टू दिस पॉइंट व्हाट आई फाउंड कि स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन ऑफ पोर्टफोलियो रिड्यूस्ड। अब उसके आगे मैं वाई बढ़ाते जा रहा हूं तो पोर्टफोलियो रिस्क मेरा बढ़ना शुरू होते जा रहा है। गेटिंग दिस? सो ये जो मुझे लोवेस्ट पॉइंट मिला, द लोवेस्ट पॉइंट हियर is the minimum variance portfolio. It is the minimum variance portfolio. Now students might ask sometime कि सर इसमें ऐसा हो सकता है कि लाइक ऐसे हो के फिर ऐसे आए। It should not happen. It won't happen. ये लास्ट वाला नहीं होगा। It can happen कि ये जो लाइन है वो linearly यहाँ के टच हो जाए, possible, सीधा का सीधा कम होते होते इधर आ गई। So that means this is the one which is having the lowest risk. So 100% in Y is your minimum variance portfolio, but more often than not, if you are having correlation, so ऐसी opportunities बनती है हमारे पास, and this is the combination called minimum variance portfolio. I hope this is clear. So nothing in chat box, I think. So clear है. Now, how do I find out minimum variance portfolio? Once again, it is a derived formula, so not getting onto the derivation. Just a moment. Okay, now look at this. Weight of security A in the portfolio. If we are exploring opportunity, so weight of security A in the portfolio for minimum variance is equal to, अब मैंने यहाँ पर A लिया है तो यहाँ पर variance of B ले रहा हूँ, right? I am writing variance of B minus correlation standard deviation AB, so it is as good as I can say minus AB मैं ले सकता हूँ, right? So ये हो गया। अब डिनोमिनेटर, ये इक्वेशन बहुत आसान है, इट इज वेरिएंस ऑफ ए वेरिएंस ऑफ बी माइनस 2 कोवेरिएंस। तो आप ऐसे भी इक्वेशन बहुत इजीली याद रख सकते हो कि लाइक वेट ऑफ एक्स, यहाँ पर लिखते हैं, चलो वेट ऑफ एक्स इज इक्वल टू वेरिएंस ऑफ वाई माइनस कोवेरिएंस डिवाइडेड बाय वेरिएंस ऑफ एक्स प्लस वेरिएंस ऑफ वाई माइनस 2 कोवेरिएंस, दैट इज 2 COV। अब आपको मान लो कि कोरिलेशन दिया है तो फाइंड आउट कोवेरिएंस एंड सॉल्व इट, राइट? सो दिस हाउ यू कैन फाइंड आउट मिनिमम वेरिएंस पोर्टफोलियो। एंड यस, इंट्यूशन, जो लॉजिक है वो तो बैठना ही चाहिए माइंड में, हम ढूंढ क्या रहे। ऐसा भी हो सकता है लाइक, सो आई एम टेकिंग इट फर्दर, इट मे हैपन दैट इट रीचेस ऑलमोस्ट जीरो हियर एंड देन इट शूट्स अप, पॉसिबल है। सो दिस वुड आल्सो बी नोन एज minimum variance portfolio in this case. But minimum variance need not necessarily zero every time. That is also to be remembered. So एक question करते हैं. This is the question to be solved. We've got equity and bond, और मनी मार्केट का है रिटर्न 8% और स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन 0 है, तो दैट इज एक्चुअली as far as our definition is concerned is the coefficient of correlation between the returns on two risky funds. ये दो रिस्की फंड्स है, इसके बीच का कोरिलेशन हमें दिया है, दैट इज जस्ट 0.01, बहुत ही छोटा है. The proportion of funds to be invested in two risky assets so as to form minimum variance portfolio. ठीक है, चलो सॉल्व करते हैं. So first of all, I want covariance. Covariance is equal to कोरिलेशन. अब देखो ये छोटे छोटे फॉर्मूलाज अब हमको काम लगेंगे. into standard deviation of equity into standard deviation of bonds. So correlation is just small number है, बहुत ही छोटा correlation है. Standard deviation of equity is 30 and standard deviation of bond is 15. So it is 450 and 450 into 0.01, that is equal to just 4.5. बहुत छोटा number. That is the covariance. So I just missed to read a question. Sorry, Samir has a question. So does that mean that minimum variance is the point where risk return trade-off in both securities same? Not exactly. So इसका हम minimum variance portfolio ढूंढते हैं. चलो, so I find out weight of equity करेंगे तो आएगा variance of bond minus covariance divided by variance of equity plus variance of bond minus 2 covariance. That's the formula. Okay, let's work on it. अब यहाँ पर variance bond का कितना है? 15, right? So 15 squared minus 4.5 divided by 30 का square plus 15 का square minus 2 covariance, that is 9. So now let me know. बहुत ही अलग अलग आंसर सबके क्यों इतने सिंपल मैथमेटिक्स में, बट आई स्टिल टेक द कॉमन आंसर, मोस्ट कॉमन आंसर, दैट इज राउंडेड. अच्छा, ये 19.75 है, दैट इज द मोस्ट कॉमन आंसर. सो 0.1975, दैट शुड बी द वेट ऑफ इक्विटी. चलो, तो वेट ऑफ इक्विटी इज इक्वल टू 0.1975. तो चलो, तो वेट ऑफ डेट बताओ. So that is, yes, 0.8025. So this is the combination. This is the combination at which the portfolio risk will reduce. Need not necessarily to be at 0. It will reduce, and then it will rise further. It will rise further, right? So ये combination पे जो आप अगर like if you find out the standard deviation of portfolio considering these weights, that is going to be the lowest possible standard deviation by combining these two securities. अगर आप इक्विटी का वेट कम करोगे यहां से या बढ़ाओगे, दोनों केस में आपका रिस्क बढ़ेगा. सो इफ आई हैव टू से शो यू ऑन दिस, तो 80-20 लेके चले तो से फॉर एग्जांपल यहाँ पर आई हैव गॉट इक्विटी एंड डेट. मान लो इक्विटी का वेट 20% है. सो व्हाट माइट हैपन इज कि यहाँ से ये 30 से हमने शुरू किया, it was 30 here and say 15 here, ऐसे हमने लिया. So up to this point it will reduce. ठीक है, ये reduce हुआ, फिर यहाँ से वो बढ़ना शुरू हो जाएगा and then it will go to 15. So say for example यहाँ से मैं equity weight कम करूंगा या बढ़ाऊंगा, like whatever be the case, definitely मेरा रिस्क बढ़ेगा. That is the intuition here. So that is the concept of minimum variance portfolio, and it is tested almost every time you've got this in examination. Minimum variance portfolio हम ला भी चुके हैं. Do you have the next class at 2 o'clock? हाँ, अर्जुन का क्वेश्चन काफी इंटरेस्टिंग है. Now to answer your question, तो covariance का concept है that in itself is between two securities. That itself is between two securities. तो हम ये तीन security के बीच में optimal combination बिठा नहीं सकते. हाँ, right. I think you got yes SSR session lined up next. ठीक है. अच्छा, मैं आंसर्स कर देता हूँ सबके because we have to now wind up. So point 1975. Okay, समीर, इसका मीनिंग ऐसा हुआ कि you would be investing 19.75% of your portfolio into equity and rest in debt. With this combination, आपके ये दो सिक्योरिटी के बीच में जो लोवेस्ट पॉसिबल स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन हो सकता है पोर्टफोलियो का, वो आप अचीव कर पाओगे एट दिस कॉम्बिनेशन. ट्रू? चलो मैं देखता हूँ because I think ऐसे like they are then statistical programs computer based. अपने मैनुअल में अर्जुन ऐसा नहीं आने वाला. So manually you cannot solve it. Probably some programming we have to check if somebody has prepared such programs. Okay, I think we do not have any other questions. ठीक है, चलो. So we wind up today's session. And we shall be meeting tomorrow. And मैं थोड़ा R&D करता हूँ so that I'll check whether if my camera switches on, right? चलो, see you tomorrow. Bye.